All right, everybody, it's 3 o'clock. We'll call this meeting of the Resource Planning Committee to order. Louder yet? All
I
right.
can hear you.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a hearing conducted by the Resource Planning Committee of the Door County Board of Supervisors. My name is Ken Fisher. I'm the chair of the committee and represent District 10, which is in the city of Sturgeon Bay. We have Mariah Good, the planning director, and Sue Van Langenberg, the zoning administrator. They will act as clerks this afternoon. I will now let the other members introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, I'm Dave Lino. I'm District 20, which is Sister Bay and a portion of one of the wards of Liberty Grove.
Good afternoon, I'm Don City. I am District 19, which is a portion of Bailey's Harbor and Liberty Grove as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Enagel. I represent the Village of Egg Harbor, a portion of the town of Egg Harbor, a portion of Jacksonport, and a portion of Bailey's Harbor.
And good afternoon also. My name is Susan Kohout, and I'm representing District 6, which is the town of Sturgeon Bay and the southeast corner of the town of Nassauwappee.
All right, thank you. The purpose of this hearing is to gather testimony on the various cases on today's agenda. You are encouraged to explain how your interests are affected, how the public is affected, and to bring out any facts pertinent to the case related to public health, safety, convenience, and general welfare. There are two types of cases on today's agenda, zoning amendments and conditional uses. In the case of a zoning amendment petition to amend either the map or the text of the county zoning ordinance, our committee conducts this hearing and makes a recommendation to the entire Door County Board of Supervisors to either approve the petition, approve a modified version of the petition, or to deny the petition. The county board will make the final decision on the zoning amendment petitions. In the case of a conditional use permit application, the Resource Planning Committee will hold this hearing and we will make the decision at a regular open meeting in the near future. I've got written down here, likely later this afternoon. Oh, it does say if time allows. We will try to get this all done tonight. These decisions are normally final but may be appealed to the Door County Board of Adjustment. The procedure which we will use this afternoon in conducting these hearings is as follows. I will read the legal notice and will then call upon the clerk for an explanation of the case. Resource Planning Committee members will then report any background information they have. There will be 2 rounds of testimony from those of you in attendance. The applicant will go first, followed by others in favor. Those in opposition will speak second. Persons with only questions or concerns should speak as if they are in opposition. Because of the need, the second round is for the purpose of rebuttal. Only those who spoke in the first round may speak in rebuttal. Because of a need to prepare a clear record of your testimony, I ask that only one person come to the table at a time. If you want to testify, please come forward, state your name and address, and then present your testimony. Statements from the back of the room and exchanges between parties will not be allowed. Speakers presenting repetitive or irrelevant testimony will be excused from the table. Following this afternoon's hearings, the committee will adjourn and reconvene to its regular business meeting. You may observe those proceedings but may not participate in them. Please take this opportunity to silence cell phones, pagers, and similar devices. Now, there's a lot of you here. I would imagine most of you want to have something to say. I've never stopped anybody from coming up and speaking because this is about your only chance you get to really crab at your elected officials. But please don't listen to one person come up and repeat the same thing. I mean, you certainly come up and state your name and that. You can paraphrase what they said, and say you agree, but don't spend 5 or 10 minutes saying the same thing over because time is important and we want to get through everybody, okay? Is that acceptable to everybody? Okay. That being said, now that I chastised the group, let's see once. Let's go to, we'll go to the zoning matters.
Did I notice you for these?
What is that?
Did I notice?
I have these.
That's the first thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Now let's see once. Okay. I guess I could ask first, we have the town of Gibraltar, the Magnetic North, and that's a request for the Apple pressing. Is anybody here to speak on that?
Yes.
Okay. Town of Jacksonport, Robert Geithner, the conditional use permit by Mr. G's. Okay. And then Stella Maris, from Town of Gibraltar, Stella Maris Parish for the Northern Sky Theater. A few more. And the Town of Sevastopol. Yeah, I was trying to see if there was a big group that was gonna speak all in one, we'd go to that one first, but it's not gonna matter much. Okay. We'll take the Town of Liberty Grove first. Magnetic North BE LLC requests a conditional use permit as required by sections 2.05 sub 3 and sub A and 11.04 to expand the existing apple pressing, fermentation, and bottling facility and associated tasting room by adding an outdoor seating area. The property is located at 12040 Garrett Bay Road in Section 14, Town 32 North, Range 28 East, and in a mixed-use commercial or MC zoning district.
Okay, thank you. As this is coming up, the general location of the property is in the northwest portion of Liberty Grove near Ellison Bay. You can see here the parcel is highlighted in yellow, and it's located between Garrett Bay Road and State Highway 42. You may know this area, the Viking restaurant is right in this area, so you may be familiar with that. This parcel is just over a half acre in size, and it has 120 feet of road frontage along Garrett Bay Road. As mentioned in the notice, they're already authorized for the apple processing, fermentation, and bottling, along with the tasting room. Also on the property is an attached garage with living quarters above it. The road is fairly heavily traveled in this area. Other than that, I'm gonna switch over to page 22 of the packet, which is the zoning districts. It's located within the MC zoning district. There is a residence to the north as well as the post office across the street. To the south, it is obviously still zoned mixed-use commercial with a single-family residence, art gallery, and Old Gus Bunke garage, and then the Bay Lake Bank. Oops, the laser's different location. To the east, we have single-family residential homes, art framing store, and then to the west is still zone mixed-use commercial. There's residential homes there, as well as some vacant lots. Historically, the Resource Planning Committee had issued a conditional use back in 2009 for the use that has been established on site. Right now, the conditional use is to put outdoor seating on the patio that is situated adjacent to the road. All standards have been met. They have all the required parking that's needed. But since this is considered an expansion of that use, a conditional use permit needs to be issued. At the time that it was granted in 2009, there were no conditions placed on that permit. As I said, this area is zoned mixed-use commercial. It's intended to be a mixture of both residential and commercial uses in an area that already has been developed as a business center. The use is consistent with the purpose of the zoning ordinance. And then within our staff report, we have listed potential conditions should you decide to place them. Typically, all uses that are authorized by conditional use need to be established within 12 months. Any outdoor lighting erected should be downlit so it's not cast off the property or skyward. That the use shall comply with all local, state, and federal codes. And then, should you deem it important, you could always comment as far as the hours of operation, as far as conditions go. At this point in time, I'll turn it over to Mariah Good for the planning considerations.
So the comprehensive plan future land use map shows this property being within the Ellison Bay core area as well as designated as commercial. So I provided the core area text, and this is basically intended to be a mixture of higher intensity, higher density uses, mixture of residential and commercial. Obviously, this proposed use fits that, as well as fitting the specific designation of commercial within that core area. And again, as Sue said, they're just asking to expand an existing business that's already there. There were a couple of goals, policies, and action items from the plan that I thought were potentially relevant. Goal 6 of the plan talks about encouraging quality, affordable housing and economic development that fits Door County. And culinary arts seem to be a bigger trend right now and something that are taking off in Door County, and I think this would qualify as being supported by that goal. And that's all I have.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
there's a second application format there with it. Oh, that's the one for the existing use.
Within the packet, they did include the previous application as background.
That's it.
all right, any other questions? If not, would the applicant please come forward?
We may have to remind them to state their name and address. Thank you. Where do I go?
Right here.
Am I back to them?
No, you can just sit right there, that's fine. By the way, anybody coming up, please state your name and address.
To you or to them?
To
Well,
us.
to us.
For
To
the
us.
record.
Okay.
It's gotta be on the
Should I
record.
stand?
Yeah. No, you don't have to stand.
You're doing fine.
My
Yeah,
name
yeah.
is Yannick, and I'll spell it, okay? Somebody's writing. Yannique, and the last name is Perman, P like Paul, Urman. An address, the address of the property, 102,
I have it on your
Right,
notice.
thank you.
Yeah, we have it.
North Garrett Bay Road.
Okay.
Garrett Bay Road, actually. Ellison Bay, and the
Thank you.
zip.
All right. So you just tell us what you're planning to do.
My husband and I own, I feel like I'm talking to them and then you guys, I don't know what to do.
That's, you're fine, just,
Okay. My husband and I get nervous, you guys, when I speak in public. My husband and I own Island Orchard Cider, and we're a hard cider, and we have an orchard on Washington Island, and we ferment and bottle the ciders at this location, and we have a tasting room there. And we'd like to be able to offer people seating outside to enjoy a glass of cider and some bites of cheese. And our hours of operation are noon to 6. And so we are just an afternoon. We are not at all interested in becoming evening, et cetera. Our primary focus is the production of cider in that building, and then a sampling room where people taste the cider, purchase bottles of cider, and leave. But we want to expand to allow people to have the opportunity to sit there and enjoy a glass of cider with a small bite
okay.
in the warm weather. So this is a limited, we're open from,
Does today qualify?
yeah, from May through November. And so this would be, it's a seasonal, our tasting room is open May through November, but our production is year-round.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
I do. On number 8 on your application, it's the part about the emergency services, and it's supposed to be signed by the fire chief. They didn't circle can or cannot access. And there is a circle around number 8 with a
Well-
yes there, so I'm assuming,
I think they typed the yes in there.
There are
But
2 pages sometimes.
well, it's,
I'll let you finish your question. I had
no,
a
no,
question about the
I
same.
just wondered about
Let me get
whether
a
we've
larger
got
font so I
them
can read it.
to react to that.
Oh, you're right, didn't circle.
They didn't circle. It says other comments, none, and they just signed it.
Okay. So they're okay with it? I mean, it's right on the road, right?
In fact, the first application, they didn't circle it either, but then they did have comments as well.
Right, and I had a question about the comments that were listed under the inspection, about the exit and entry lights had to be illuminated, exits made clear of blockage, prior to operations, working fire extinguishers must be mounted first and second floors. This allowance is conditional upon fire insulation? Is that what it, can't,
I think that's what it says.
will those conditions be met?
I think they've already been met.
Yeah, that was.
We've
from-
had,
I'm just
that was
making
the
sure.
original, and then we've had inspections since then.
Right.
Yeah, so that's from the original
Right.
application,
Right.
not from the
We
current
we
application.
remodeled the building, so.
And I inspected it, so I
Oh, thank you.
don't remember those
Thank you.
not being there.
Right, but if those were there, then on the second application, there would have been no reason for them
Right.
to do anything else
Yeah.
than what they did.
All right. Any other questions? All right.
One question, do you plan on putting any kind of fencing or anything around the area?
No.
Maybe to hold it, okay.
Maybe some more bushes in the front, depends upon our bushes, but, I mean, no, not, definitely not a fence.
Okay. Just so close to the road.
Well, I thought you're putting a guardrail up though.
Well, there currently is a planter,
Yeah.
and there is a space between the planter on two sides, on the roadside and then on our parking lot side. So,
Okay.
I,
Yeah, that's fine.
okay,
All right.
That answers it, yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal?
Bud Collins, Clerk Administrator for the Town of Liberty Grove, 11161 Old State Road. Ready?
Ready.
Okay. I sent a letter down, you might have a copy of this, but the Plan Commission met in April on the 22nd, discussed the application. Mr. Perman was there and described what he would like to do with outdoor seating. He wants to make his place more of a destination. Putting tables out in front, needs no extra lighting because he closes at 6 o'clock, nothing going on after dark. There were some neighbors there that raised some concerns about traffic and parking. The Town Highway Committee met on Monday, addressed those concerns, made some recommendations to the town board. And there'll be some parking places marked on the road there to facilitate traffic. And also the center line is going to be striped and brought to a right angle at the highway, because right now it's an acute angle and it's kind of screwy there. People coming off of 42 from the south will cut it and head north and be kind of speeding there. We've got the speed board set up the hill there to hopefully slow traffic down a little bit and make it a little safer in that area. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic going to the post office and to this establishment. Another establishment has moved in next door now. I believe it's a pottery shop or some kind of art thing there. The town board met on May 6th and went over the recommendation of the Plan Commission. We're happy about the answers that were given and voted 3-0 to send a letter down, and here I am.
And you have no problem with the lighting, like you say, because of the 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. closing time?
No problem.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Collins? All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? All right. Were there any other letters in favor, other than the one we had?
We have nothing new.
Okay. Is there anybody wishing to speak against the proposal? Anybody wishing to speak against the proposal? No. Okay, then we will move on to Town of Jacksonport. Oh, no letters against?
No,
Okay.
none at all.
All right, then we'll move on. All right, Town of Jacksonport. Robert J. Geithner requests a conditional use permit as required by sections 2.05 sub 3 and A, 4.04 sub 10, and 11.04 to establish a home business for a kayak paddle outdoor tour business. The property is located at 5890 State Highway 57 in Section 28, Town 29 North, Range 27 East, and in the General Agricultural or GA zoning district.
Okay, so this property is located in the southeast portion of Jacksonport, just north of County Highway I, which is right here. The main downtown is about 1.5 miles north. This parcel is just over 20 acres in size. It's obviously irregular in shape and is adjacent to Logan Creek that flows down into Clark Lake. Currently on the property, there is a supper club with an accessory residence within. There's quite a bit of access on State Highway 57 with quite a large, substantial parking area. The elevation on the property changes about 24 feet in elevation from the northeast corner sloping down to the east side of the parcel towards Logan Creek. However, the majority of the parcel, as you can see, is heavily wooded. In fact, the impervious surface on this lot is only 8%, taken as a whole. The parking area, which you can see on the air photo is white, is just over 400 feet from Logan Creek. Now I'll switch to the zoning map. In this area, the majority of the property is zoned general agricultural with wetlands interspersed. South of this property, we have natural area and wetlands surrounding Logan Creek area. There's intermixed smaller lots with residences, agricultural uses, and probably a couple vacant lots as well. Both the commercial use of the property, the restaurant and tavern or supper club, has been here for many, many years prior to zoning, as well as the accessory residence that's within the structure. What they are applying for is a home business being operated out of the accessory residence, which allows for the home business to take up to 100% of the floor area of that accessory residence. So what they're proposing with their kayak and paddle rental is that they would have use 600 square feet within the supper club as a room to check in guests for the tours, as well as 550 square feet in an accessory building or a detached garage on site, which is behind the restaurant and isn't even visible from the highway. Tours are anticipated to consist of 12 customers. Proposed hours of operations, 8 a.m. to sunset. They're proposing to use the existing bathrooms within the supper club. And obviously the parking there is adequate for both uses. Most likely the two uses won't even overlap as far as the use of the parking lot for both uses. Within the zoning ordinance, general ag is intended to be maintained as agricultural land to accommodate certain non-ag uses, which require spacious areas to operate where natural resource exploration occurs. As far as does this use meet the intent of the zoning ordinance, this use has existed for many, many years. And by adding this additional use to the property, it won't change much of anything, the look or feel of that property. Should the committee determine that the proposed use at this proposed site will not be contrary to the public interest, there were conditions listed in the staff report, which is on page 46 and 47 of the packet. Uses highlighted that may come into play relate to outdoor lighting, which is a typical condition, as well as local, state, federal building codes. If they choose to put a sign up for this home business, the ordinance limits them to a 12 square foot sign for the business on site. The ordinance also requires that any outdoor storage is screened either by fencing or vegetation and is not seen from the public rights of way. With all other conditional uses, the use shall be established within 12 months. And then if the RPC wishes to establish some hours of operation. With that, I'll turn it over to Mariah for planning considerations.
On the future land use map in the comprehensive plan, this parcel is shown as woodland, wetland, natural, and I provided you with the text description of what is envisioned for that area. As Sue said, only less than 10% of this property is actually impervious surface or buildings, so the vast majority that's not developed and probably does fit that category. And what's there now has been there since before zoning, and the addition of this use isn't gonna change the character of that property or have any impact on the natural resources on the property. So I didn't have any concerns as far as the comprehensive plan for this case.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? If not, would the applicant please step forward?
Howdy.
Yeah.
My name is Robert J. Geithner. I'm proposing today for a conditional use
Address?
permit. Oh, sorry, 5890 Highway 57.
Thank you.
Above the restaurant. So I'm proposing today for a conditional use permit, mostly for the use of the parking lot, actually. I approached a local landowner in Jacksonport, business owner, and she was unable to support a conditional use permit on Lake Michigan. So I figured, well, if I can't work with her, and I'd really like to be in downtown Jacksonport, I figured I'd come out to the suburbs where I could probably get a pretty good deal on rent. And just luckily, my father and mother own a large swath of land. Like you said, it's only, 10% of it is impervious surfaces, but that's kind of what I'm looking for right now is that massive parking lot. Just a little backstory on a kayak company. We launch all over the county. I've been a member of working with kayak companies before, and I'm kind of doing my own little thing. So, with the way the county's structured now, there's a lot more people up here every year. Our launch points are pretty congested, so having people meet down at these launch points can be quite a challenge. So we meet from 7 a.m. till sunset. We need some parking, and I kind of wanted traffic to stay away from these launch points. So we have a little kayak bus, and we just pick people up at this location, and we transport them to wherever in the county the winds are most favorable for kayaking. Like I said, this is a really great spot. It's close enough to Jacksonport where we can launch down along the lakeside. We can also commute across County I to the bayside. With that, we have a very large building. It's mostly vacant most of the year. It's kind of foolish not to use it, and I thought it'd be exciting to get people around this area. The neighbors seem to be okay with it. I hope they're not minding too early in the mornings, but obviously we don't kayak at night, so we don't need lights, really. We don't need anything special. We don't need anything more than the existing structures, actually. Kayak company, we pretty much have everything on the bus we need. We are pretty much internet-based. I have a company set up already that does our internet business, so our booking is all done online. So we're really, a meeting point for people. It's a pretty good spot. It's quiet. It is on Highway 57, which is a busy area, but we have, over 500 feet where they can pull in. So it seems a pretty logical spot for it, and it seems pretty safe. The fire chief seemed fine with it. And with that being said, that's kind of where I'm going with it. So any questions, guys?
Any questions for the applicant?
Yes, you got the hours of operation from 7 a.m. to sunset.
Yeah.
Is that 7 days a week?
If we have tours, if it's sunny,
I understand.
So it's kind of, the big reason we're using this is we were going to use it, and my father thought it'd be good to get a conditional use permit, because apparently need one for using a parking lot, which people use it anyway. But so it's a sunny day. We'll get tours in the morning. I say sunset. There's not a lot of sunset tours that go out because winds change, and later in the day it gets to be a little hairier. So most of the tours I assume that I'll have are probably about 80% will be at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., and noon. So they arrive 7 o'clock. Since I don't have a CDL, our bus can only hold 12 people anyway, so we can't ever have more than that in a tour. And then we just kind of go around the county from there.
And so then when you are obviously out of operation, when it's snowing outside, you have ample storage space to put all these?
Yeah, actually, we don't even store them in Wisconsin. But if we needed to store them,
You do not store them in Wisconsin?
the kayaks, we normally try to sell them off.
I
That's
see.
historically, it's what my friend has done, and that's what I assume I would do. But storage-wise, yeah. we don't have a lot of overhead, so Life Vest can fit in the bus along, and then you have paddles, which break down in half, and you do have some kayaks, but, you know, towards the end of the season, you try to sell off they don't really hold up very well. As you can imagine, the peninsula's a little rocky, so it's pretty, we don't send a lot of overhead, so.
Thank you.
Okay, Suzie?
No, he answered my question about the hours.
No other questions? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Yes.
My name is William Hebel. I own the property next to the Geithners on
Address?
Logan Creek.
We need your
Oh, my
address, too.
address is 5558 West Shore Drive, Sturgeon Bay.
Thank you.
I've owned the property next to them for 20-plus years, and so I've known Bob and Mary Geithner for years, and they operate a really tight ship, and I think it's really great when a young person decides that he wants to start something and be an entrepreneur. And I have nothing but good words for him, and I think it should be a fun experience for them, and I hope that they also launch some of them on Logan Creek, because it's a beautiful place, and not many people know of its beauty. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions?
All right, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? No? Okay, are there any other letters in favor other than the ones we got?
Only the ones in the packet.
That's it.
Which included the town, right?
Correct.
Why am I? Oh, here. Just a minute here. Oh, that's not. Okay. Is there anybody wishing to speak against the proposal? Anybody wishing to speak against the proposal? Are there any letters against?
There are no letters in opposition.
Okay. Then we'll end that and go to the Town of Gibraltar. Stella Maris Parish Corporation, on behalf of Northern Sky Theater Incorporated, petitions for an amendment to the detailed zoning map of the Town of Gibraltar to change the zoning district classification of a vacant 17-acre parcel from Countryside 5 or CS5 to General Commercial GC. The rezoning request is being sought in order for Northern Sky Theater Incorporated to apply for a conditional use permit to establish a fine arts venue. The parcel is located at the intersection of County Highway F and County Highway A in the southeast corner of Section 2, Town 30 North, Range 27 East.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this property is located centrally within the town of Gibraltar, as you said, at the southeast intersection of County Highway F and County Highway A. 17 acres in size, the majority of the lot is wooded. However, there are some portions that have agricultural fields in the southeast portion of the property. There's frontage both on County F and A, as it appears on the air photo there. And at this point, we're gonna switch over to the zoning map on page 63 of your packet. As you can see, to the south and to the east, the property is zoned Countryside 5. There is an orchard and ag use to the south, with some vacant land, as well as some larger lots with some homes. There is also to the, get my laser pointer, to the east over here, we have a small non-metallic mine and plumbing shop owned by Gary Kraus. And then if we move to the north, the properties directly to the north are zoned Heartland 5. I know it's hard to see the color variation, but this section is zoned differently than to the west. So up in this north, directly north is Heartland 5, mainly residential lots with a few vacant lots as well. Moving over to the west of County A, the properties are zoned Heartland 3.5. There's a vacant wooded area as well as several residential lots. There's also general commercial. I don't know if you can see this right here, a little strip of general commercial. And the lots include the Greenwood Supper Club and a former beauty shop. And at the southwest corner of the intersection, oops, over here, we also have a jewelry shop on the northwest corner of the intersection. So with any rezoning application or proposal within your packet, we always try to illustrate the different districts. So currently it's Countryside 5, and then the proposed district, general commercial. The minimum size for a new lot is 5 acres in the current district, and just under a half acre in the proposed district, with minimum lot width currently at 250 feet, and the general commercial district of 100 feet. We also like to show how many lots could be created under the current zoning, which is a total of 3 5-acre lots, or slightly over. Obviously, half-acre lots, several 30-plus lots could be made, but realistically, I'm sure it would be much less than that if someone wanted to ever subdivide that. Under the zoning ordinance, the purpose of the district's Countryside 5, it's intended to be mostly rural area in the interior of the county, where there's a mixture of low-density residential, agriculture, and limited rural commercial activity. The district provides for residential development at modest densities consistent with the general rural environment, and allows for non-residential uses that require relatively large land areas or compatible with the surrounding area. So the general commercial district, according to the zoning ordinance, is intended to provide for limited areas of residential and commercial uses. The district is a result of a need to recognize existing local and neighborhood businesses. Typically, the district will be located within or near existing communities, but is also intended for outlying or smaller nodes of development. In addition, the district can be used for a transition between business centers and strictly residential areas. For the purpose of the proposed rezoning, obviously, the owner has applied on behalf, excuse me, let me grab this, of Northern Sky Theater, and they plan to establish a fine arts venue on the property. Fine arts venue is not allowed in the Countryside district in this town, but it is allowed in the general commercial district, and that is the intent of the rezoning. We've also included, and it's page 71 through 77 within the packet, the ordinance table of uses, which if you should want to, you can go through that table of uses to see what districts are allowed in both zoning districts, both the current and the proposed. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mariah for the planning considerations.
So whenever you're looking at a petition to rezone, we have some standard questions that you usually look at, whether or not there was a mistake made in the original mapping process, whether or not circumstances have changed, and so those questions were in the packet that you've been provided. There wasn't a mistake in the original mapping process. Circumstances have certainly changed for Stella Maris, although not necessarily too much for that area. And one of the questions that you need to consider is whether the adjacent properties, or I'm sorry, whether the rezoning would allow higher intensity or higher density uses than those allowed on surrounding properties. And in this case, you do have some nearby properties zoned general commercial, as Sue showed, but there also are some zoned Heartland 3.5 and Countryside 5. So it's kind of a mixture as far as whether or not it's going to allow things that are more intense or more dense than the other areas. As far as whether or not the new district is an official fit with plan guidelines, it does not fit the future land use map designation, which I'll get to in a minute. But there are the proposed use of the property. It does fit a number of the plan goals and action items. So you'll have to decide how you want to balance those two parts of the plan. And then and these questions are essentially what you're supposed to consider in terms of deciding whether or not something is a so-called spot zoning. And then the last issue with regard to spot zoning is whether or not it's simply to economically benefit one property owner or a small group of property owners. And, you know, my analysis is that, well, yes, it's gonna directly benefit Northern Sky Theater. There's certainly an arguable overall public good to the town of Gibraltar to have them have a fine arts venue in that town. As far as the comprehensive plan future land use map designation, it is designated on the future land use map as rural/agricultural. And I provided that description for you. I'm not gonna read it to you now. So the district that's being proposed is not one that's envisioned by that rural/agricultural future land use map. But in any other town, this use would be allowed in this district, in that countryside district. So from the county's perspective, that use does fit with that future land use designation. And obviously, if Northern Sky Theater purchases the property and is going to put a fine arts venue there, that is a conditional use process, which is a second separate hearing where you would be able to potentially alleviate concerns that people might have. As far as relevant goals and action items from the comprehensive plan, it is a somewhat wooded property, and we do have, in a rural area, and we do have goals in the plan that talk about preserving and protecting wildlife habitats and natural features, as well as rural atmosphere and heritage. So those are things that you might want to take into consideration as far as a rezoning. Again, with the proposed use of the property, it would be a conditional use permit application, so some of those concerns related to those topics could presumably be addressed at that point. We also have two goals in the comprehensive plan that I think largely support the establishment of the proposed use of the property. Goal 5 talks about supporting cultural and historical festivals, events, and activities. And Goal 6 talks again about encouraging economic opportunities for the current and future population. And I think there are pieces of those goals that I provided in your staff report that would support the proposed use of the property. And as far as any other relevant text from the county comprehensive plan, I provided the vision statement for you from the historical and cultural resources chapter of the plan, because I think that supports pretty strongly, supporting the arts in Door County. So that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions? Dave?
The proposed zoning change would also mean smaller lots, correct?
Potentially.
It would
Potentially.
allow for that. I don't
Yeah.
think that that's the
But
intent.
right, potentially allow for it.
Right.
Okay.
Dave?
Mariah, what was the intent of the parish to do with that property, and would it have required a change in zoning?
There might be somebody from Stella Maris here to answer that question. I think they had originally intended, they stated in their letter that they had originally thought they were going to build a church there, and that I'd like to look and see
That's
if
what's
that-
in the letter, that is dug into that. But they're not now.
And would that have been allowed without a rezoning?
I'm going to check right now.
I think so. Seems like that's what I saw when I looked at the chart. Hang on a second.
Yes, a church would be allowed in this district by a conditional use permit.
In the current.
In the
In the
current
current district, it would be allowed by a conditional use permit. A church in the proposed or the requested district would be a regular zoning permit.
Thank you.
Yes, Don?
Yes, Mariah, my understanding then is that if we do change it, that in the future, if they decided to sell it, that there could be a gas station there,
Who decided to sell it?
if they sold it.
Well, once you rezone a property, as with any rezoning petition, usually the person that's petitioning to rezone has a reason they want to rezone it because they've got a proposal. But yeah, once you rezone it, any of the uses that are allowed in that district could theoretically go there. Most of the time, the use that goes there is the one that's being proposed, but.
In one of the letters that I read, the concern was that if it is rezoned, that any type of commercial activity could be there if in the event that the arts place is no longer there, or decide to sell it in the future, or looking way down the road here, okay?
Right, I mean, once it's rezoned, it's rezoned. You've got a representative from the town board here. I mean, you could talk, towns do have the legal right to petition to rezone property, so a town could petition to rezone. The owner would have to want to go along with it, or they could block it, but, I mean, there's, yeah, I mean, once it's rezoned, but I would imagine if it's rezoned and then purchased by Northern Sky and they actually develop it as a fine arts venue, that it's probably gonna stay a fine arts venue.
Good.
Did I hear you correctly say that in the existing zoning, the intended use a conditional use would be acceptable for the intended use?
No, somebody asked me about a church.
For the church, I'm sorry, that's what I mean. If they were gonna put a church there, the current owner were to put a church there, it'd be a conditional use in the
Correct.
existing zoning.
Correct.
But it'd be a permitted use.
I just
in
put the
change.
chart up on the screen if you wanna kind of scroll through the uses. I don't know if you wanna do that or not, and what's allowed in each.
And Don's question, the gas station would be a conditional use permit under the change.
Yeah, so for those in the audience, the way this chart works, if it's a blank, then that use is not allowed in that district. Countryside 5 is what the property is right now. General commercial is what's being requested, so if it's a blank, it's not allowed. If it's a P, that means it's a regular zoning permit. If it's a C, that means it's a conditional use permit, which is a hearing in front of this body. So I'll let you skim through that page and I'll go down. So this is.
You made a comment, though, that in one of the zoning districts in any other part of the county, it would be an approved use. That's what I was referring to.
Oh, in the countryside zoning district in all the other towns, a fine arts venue is allowed via conditional use, but it's allowed in that zoning district.
But it's
But
not,
not
it
in
is
the
not
town
in
of
town of
Gibraltar.
Gibraltar.
Correct.
They have an
So this is an
overlay.
exception to
Oh.
the general rule within the county for CS5.
In Gibraltar, right.
Okay, any other questions?
No.
I'm sorry, I was scrolling through this for the audience, but I'll just keep doing that later.
Okay, would the applicant please step forward?
My name is Richard Danhausen, 4620 Maple Ridge Road, Egg Harbor. I am the trustee treasurer for Stella Maris Parish. And Stella Maris purchased this property about 10 years ago when the parishes merged in northern Door County with the thought that we would want to build one church and close the 5 community churches that we have. There was a vote amongst the parishioners, and it was decided that the county would best be served if we retained the 5 really quaint churches that are part of each community in Northern Door. So we've had this property for sale for about 5 years and really have had very little interest in it. It's located at the intersection of A and F, which is fairly highly trafficked areas. So this is not pristine residential property for somebody to buy if they wanted to put a residence in the area. It's a high traffic intersection. And there is a lot of commercial property already along County F, both ways actually, in the area, some of which is in the CS5 district. And as was pointed out, there is commercial zoning across the street at the Greenwood location. The objections that were raised at the town hearing was that by switching to the general commercial district, we're opening it up to, many more uses than are allowed in the CS district. You know, it's not our intent to do that. We really want this fine arts venue on the property, and we feel that that's the best use for that piece of property. I think it would be a big boon to Northern Door to have that there, and it's close to the park for them and would service their needs. And as was pointed out, it's interesting to note that the fine arts venue would be allowed in the CS district in any other town in Door County except Gibraltar. So I'd like to turn over the floor to Mary Seberg from Northern Sky, who can talk about what their specific plans for the property are.
Okay, just a second. Any questions?
Yes,
for
I have a
that?
question.
Okay.
When you were planning on potentially building one single worship site there, how many parishioners would have been?
We would probably be building a church to accommodate, 750 to 1,000 people.
Okay, so if that was the one worship site, traffic on any given Sunday or Saturday would be significant?
It would be really more than what we would have at our individual sites right now.
Any other questions? I have one. Is the deal already struck? I mean, we've had this before, the situation where somebody applies for the conditional use permit for a second party that they want to sell it to, that's going to do whatever. And I just want to know that, is there a deal in the works, or how definite is Northern Sky Theater? I mean, a contract's been signed that they will buy, that the only contingency to back out is not getting the conditional use permit?
Well, that's the major, there
Or the
were
zoning change, I mean?
some other contingencies regarding, some environmental testing on the
Yeah,
property
yeah.
too. But as far as I understand, that's the only, getting the proper zoning is the main roadblock right now, and they've assured me that they have the money to pay for the
Okay.
property, so.
Okay,
And we're very anxious to have the deal go through ourselves.
okay. You have a question? Oh.
Yeah, so what you're saying then, sir, is that if this particular deal falls through, hopefully not, but if it does, and it's already rezoned to commercial, then you could have just about anything there that you wanted.
Well, in
Is that-
theory.
Is that a true statement?
In theory, yes. I've discussed this with the pastor, and, would not object to changing it back to CSR.
Well,
I know
it's-
there's
it's
issues with doing that. but-
It's pretty hard to, once you
Yeah.
rezone something that, down the line in 2 years from then, and you want to rezone it back to where it was.
What's unfortunate is that in the town of Gibraltar, this use is not permitted in the CS district.
But that's what we're working with tonight, so.
Yeah, I realize
It
that.
is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Dave, did you have a question?
It's more of a curiosity. When you were looking at building a single church, besides your typical masses, which are usually on a Saturday and Sunday, what were your other potential activities at the building? Some people have a Wednesday mass.
Well, the activities that we have in our other sites right now, we do have a daily mass, so there would be daily use of the property. We would have relocated our office there and have a parish office. There are constantly meetings going on, not only for the parish, but we allow other groups to have meetings on our sites too, so.
And of course, year-round.
And yes, year-round.
Thank you.
So it would have been a very busy, location, but it is at the intersection of two major highways in the county.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the application, please step forward.
My name is Mary Seberg, spelled with all E's. I live at 6058 Lakeshore Road in Sturgeon Bay, and I'm the chairperson of the board of Northern Sky Theater. Northern Sky Theater has a long history here in Door County, performing in Peninsula State Park. We are well established. We are not a startup organization. We have won many awards and received many kudos for the original musicals that we develop and produce, which makes us actually quite unique, and we feel a very valuable asset to Door County. Our board of directors are well-established citizens within Door County. They have helped to develop some of the finest things that we have in the county. They're very county-minded citizens. We would like to buy, when we have always rented, we have never owned anything, and we now are in a position, fortunately, financially, to look for a piece of property and build ourselves a creative center and administrative offices. Our intent is to keep the whole property. We have no intention of subdividing or doing anything else with it. We wish to put up 2 buildings. Building number 1, we're calling our creative center. It would have our rehearsal hall, our administrative offices, and costume storage. The rehearsal hall would convert into a performance center that would seat around 200 people, which we would use for workshops, for readings, and possibly for performances in the fall, not in the summer. We intend to keep performing at Peninsula State Park. The second building we intend to put up is a building that would be storage for our sets, and a workshop where we would build and paint and do things like that. Currently, we rent storage in Fish Creek in several buildings, so we wish to consolidate that. When we went to look for a parcel, as I'm sure you all are aware, if you've been to our theater, we charge a very inexpensive ticket price, and so, as you can imagine, there's always a tension of putting on a high-quality product versus providing a modest ticket, and offering a modest ticket price so that families can come and enjoy live professional theater. So we looked for a place that is near the theater, because of course that's realistic, and frankly we have to look for a place that we can afford. And we found this property which really suits us in several ways. We have a certain aesthetic as an organization because of our connection to the park, and this property, as was mentioned, because it is wooded, is that's one of the things that we find most attractive. Oh, thank you. I see you've put up our proposal. We will not have any, with a fine arts venue permit, we will not have any outdoor jazz sessions, outdoor rock concerts, nothing like that. We're precluded from doing that, but that is not our plan. The most we would have is to have a fire pit where we might have some acoustical music in an evening, just for our own enjoyment. That is something we like to do, is sit around the fire and sing. Some of us are old folkies.
Okay. Any questions for Ephraim?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Typically, how long does your fall season run?
Our fall season this year will start Labor Day weekend and it will end Fall Festival weekend. So it would be a maximum of 200 people a night. And we don't perform every night. We perform usually like 5 or 6 evenings of the week.
So for that period of time from...
That's correct. Mhm. We have 4 full-time employees, I should say, who would be using the administrative office year-round. And right now, during rehearsal period, I would say that we probably have 50, Jeff, is that a fair number, attending
probably-
rehearsals? Or is that not, is that?
Around 35 minutes.
So 35 attending rehearsals right now, and that's every day except Sunday, until we move out to the park, which we're doing right now.
Not
Good.
necessarily germane to our decision, but one of the letters questioned the fact that if you go there in the fall to a seating of 200, that's significantly less than you were drawing at the auditorium.
Actually, it's not. That the person presupposed, and we would have been delighted to fill the auditorium. However, we actually averaged about 144 people a night.
Anything else? No? Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal?
Hi.
Hi there.
My name's Dave Meyer. I'm the managing director of Northern Sky Theater. I just want to make a couple of points. And
Yeah, you
oh,
had
I'm
it.
sorry. I live at 318 South Duluth Avenue here in Sturgeon Bay. We just would like to make the RPC aware of the fact, and we hope that you consider that the Gibraltar Zoning Commission result was the result of a split vote. And we'd also like the RPC to consider that the Gibraltar Zoning Commission member, Wendy Minton, had actually expressed a desire to abstain, and though the rules did not allow her to do so, had she been allowed to maybe vote her perfect intent, the majority vote would have been a positive one. I'm going to reserve further comment in response to kind of answering objections later, and because I'll have more detailed information to provide you guys in terms of financial impact and stuff like that. And so I'll be glad to talk to you more later, unless you have any questions for me.
No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Anybody else
Can I-
wishing?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a point. Mr. Meyer explained that he might want to come back and provide additional testimony in regards to response to other issues. Would he not have to raise some of those issues now?
Yeah, I was wondering about that too.
So before we took somebody else, maybe he wants to.
Rebuttal too, rather than.
You mean just have it list off
When you
what he's
speak in
going to talk
rebuttal,
about?
It needs to be rebuttal.
it would be rebuttal to the questions that come up in the, so you spoke in favor.
Correct.
There will be some people, possibly, who will speak against it. When we call for rebuttal, you can come up and address their concerns or their issues, but you can't bring up something new.
So if
Alright.
you'd like to say something additional now about other items that you want to speak about potentially,
Now, unless you're saying that something that's brought up, you'll be willing to respond without, directly to.
I guess
Are we making ourselves clear?
you are, and I guess for the sake of not taking the chance that something might not be brought up, I would prefer to continue talking to you then.
Oh, well, then that's your choice. That's your choice.
Now.
First of all, I don't expect you to kind of follow this as we talk, but this is kind of for your later perusal. This is economic impact data that I put together. I facilitated a report for Peninsula Arts and Humanities Alliance, and this has information that encapsulates not only our economic impact to the Door County kind of economy, but also the impact of the arts in general up here, and both specific to our own organization and a kind of a selective group of arts organizations and how they impact the local economy, not only kind of residually, but also how they impact government in terms of sales tax and other good effects. So I only present that because I know that one of the things that you have to consider or would like to consider is how we have a positive effect on the community that way. So there's a lot of information there, and I won't go into it in depth, but it is significant. Our impact is significant, and it's difficult to parse out how much of that is directly an impact on the local Fish Creek community, but certainly the fact that we bring in over 10,000 patrons just in the fall for our fall season there at the Door Community Auditorium, and our winter programming there certainly has an economic impact on the local restaurants and hotels and things like that. So this has been a real learning process. Let me tell you, this is going through this kind of. We've been hit up with certain kinds of kind of challenges and kind of community. I guess. Well, I'm happy to, I guess, address some of the concerns that have come up in kind of regularly over the process here. Some of which have been noise, some of which have been traffic, and some of which have been our potential impact on that piece of property, which people are certainly rightfully concerned about. We get that. And that's a concern of ours too. I mean, and I'd like to address that to a certain extent, in as much as we know. We think we have a good vision for the property. We think we've invested a certain amount of architectural design investment. Thus far, we've had to curtail that because we want to make sure that we're economically prudent. We're a nonprofit organization, and thus far, all the investment that we've made into architectural design has been transferable. We've been asked why we didn't make the investment, and do both the rezoning petition and the conditional use permit simultaneously, and somewhat, suspiciously too. We were kind of shocked by the fact that there was, people had an issue with that, but first of all, we never kind of. We never thought that our veracity would be up for question in terms of people wondering about our intent for the property. I'm sure that the parish didn't either. So that's been a learning experience. But the other reason that we held off doing this is that we put about $15,000 into the architectural design work so far, but we know that to take it to the next step, to go through the conditional use process, we'd probably have to invest another $30,000-$40,000 into schematic design, into detailed material stuff, and we're excited to do that. We want to do that, but we want to make that's all very site specific work, and we want to make sure that we have the property first before we make that investment.
Okay. I don't mean to cut you off, but some of the items you are bringing up now, I understand why you sat down, because if they're brought up, you certainly can rebut those.
Sure.
So, but if you have more to add, go ahead. But I just wanted to ask, so you do have dollars invested in this that could be construed as site-specific?
To a certain extent, yes, we do. I mean, we're willing. We want to buy this property. We have a board member that's willing to write a check for this property as soon as we know that the zoning is petition has been approved. That's not an issue. In terms of the things that we can address, like noise, we're aware of the noise ordinance for Gibraltar. We have no issue with that. There are noise aspects built into the fine arts conditional use permit that we have no issue with. There's no amplified sound allowed, outdoor amplified sound allowed. We have no issue with that. There's no event allowed after 10:30. We have, like Mary said, most of our programming is designed for families, family friendly. Most of our demographics are, especially in the fall, they're older. We program probably, I think most of our program starts about 7:30, so most of it goes without intermission. Most of it's done by 9. We usually have people home by 10 at the latest. So, parking, you can see, we kind of modeled this on Bjorkland in a lot of ways, the way the parking is kind of, we're trying to kind of fit that into the trees and to make it kind of more surreptitious and respect the property. The architect we hired, Strang, they're renowned. They're known for the way that they kind of respect and care for property and kind of integrate the ecology into the culture of the building, and that was very important to us. Everything that the community loves about the property and wants to kind of maintain about it, we do too. We call it a campus, but we think of it as a retreat, and we want to keep that quality of it. It's all about a place to go that needs to stay surrounded by trees and needs to stay surrounded by woods and needs to have places where people can go to kind of be inspired and to be nourished, and there's everything about the way it is now that we want to preserve. Okay. So, in terms of what it is about that property, and how we want to take care of it, we want to have as little impact on it as we possibly can. Traffic, I can talk about that. I can talk about parking. I can talk about parking spaces.
Don't worry about that unless it comes up. Okay, any other questions?
I do.
Okay.
Can I assume you looked at other properties in other places?
Yes, we did. We looked at about 30 properties when we were in the hunt at the last time we went through this. We found 2 that were remotely viable because of what we're looking for is something very special, very unique. It's not a standard piece of commercial property. It's not something just on the corridor that you could, there were a couple town board members that kept saying, well, they could easily find something, on the corridor or something, and we just could not get them to understand that was not in the cards for us. That this was a unique find. There were only 2 that were remotely viable. This was the one in question is the one we're talking about now, and the other one is no longer on the market. And it was also 4 times as expensive. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I talk about one other thing?
Sure.
Okay. It's something that's come up quite a bit because it's very hard for us to defend against. It's what I'm going to call the bad things might happen argument, and it's the more we defend the more we try to address the use issues, the more times we try to address possible misconceptions about use, the more people gravitate towards the bad things might happen issue, and I get that. It's a very hard thing to address because it's very impervious, and it's something that, if you're in favor of the status quo, you love it. It's a really handy argument, and if you want change, or if you're trying to address change, it's really hard to kind of grapple with. And all I can say is, this is the only way that we can address that issue. We This is a 25-year-old organization. It's an honorable organization. It's an iconic organization. It's reputable. It's impeccable reputation. It also has, I guess, I would say that we have a partner, the parish, that feels comfortable with in joining us in this exercise, and we also have And I think you saw the letter that we sent out to the community. It's signed by our board. Our board is made up of it's made up of kind of the cream of the philanthropic community in Door County. They have committed themselves to this. They have decided that they want to see this done. And these are folks that had foundations that have been responsible for building some of the, they built the Y, they built the Peninsula Players, they built the Door Community Auditorium. These are people that don't mess around either. They are honorable people that are saying that their intent is true. So I would just say that, kind of to paraphrase Mr. Blackwood, Commissioner Blackwood from Gibraltar Zoning Commission the other night, he said something to the effect of, look, if any group deserves a little kind of simple leap of faith, it's maybe this situation. And that's the only way I can address the bad things happen argument.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
And Mariah, isn't it my understanding, or am I wrong, that once you start a hearing, that the applicant cannot submit any more material?
No.
Am I
People
wrong
try
in
stuff
that?
all the time.
Okay.
Okay.
My name is Jeffrey Herbst, and I'm Artistic Director of Northern Sky Theater. I obviously am in support of the organization being on this property. I've now turned my life's work into working for Northern Sky Theater. I started out as a young man in college, and our location in the park, I think, speaks highly to what our aesthetic would be on this property. We rebuilt the stage out there under the auspices of the DNR, and we preserved trees, and they come up through the middle of our stage. That's how important the ecology is for the aesthetic of our organization. I have colleagues that have worked with me for years and years who have dedicated their lives also to the purpose and mission of Northern Sky Theater. They come along with me to this property, and they will be stewards of it in a way that I think would be highly respected by Gibraltar. And if this unfortunate situation of Countryside 5 not being supported in Gibraltar for a fine arts venue weren't this situation, I don't think there would be any question that we would be allowed to be on that property and get a conditional use permit for it. So I think it's unfortunate that Gibraltar doesn't have that distinction. I don't know what it would take for that to be changed. I understand that this commission can actually vote for us to be on there by rezoning it, and then we can apply for a conditional use permit, which we would love to do. And as Dave said, we walked a lot of properties, and we walked along the corridors and the commercial, the things that are zoned commercial currently. And what we love about this property is that it has proximity to our performance venue in the park. And it allows for us to consolidate in a way that makes a lot of sense. And I think when I'm done with this job, I want whoever takes it over from me to be able to say that it's going to be easier for them to make the operation be successful. And this property would allow us the proximity to the park that would make our operation entirely more easy. It would allow for us to say that we can be around for at least another 25 years and a lot longer than that, I'm sure. So I want to go on record as being in approval of rezoning.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Yes?
My name is Katie Dahl. My address is 3536 County Road E, Bailey's Harbor. And I'm a board member of Northern Sky Theater, and I'm also an employee of the theater. I wanted to speak to two things. One, Mariah brought up the economic impact the theater could have, or that this organization could have, could be something that would be relevant. I have I live in Northern Door County and make my living as a playwright. Both are unusual. A playwright and a musician. Both are unusual for a 30-year-old. And it's because of Northern Sky Theater that I'm able to do both of those things. They've been a consistent employer for me and a source of inspiration for me since I was 8 years old. I've been involved with the theater. So this is a theater that's made my economic life possible in a lot of ways. So I wanted to speak to that and also to speak to the organization's longevity and its serious commitment to this property. We as a board are fully interested in pursuing this property and making this happen. So we're in.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No, thank you. Yes.
My name is Cynthia Steele. That's spelled S-T-I-E-H-L. I live at 9983 South Dane Street in Ephraim. And I would just like to read the mission statement, about which I'm very proud, for Northern Sky Theater. I also serve on the board and was a founding board member. The mission of Northern Sky Theater is to create, develop, and present professional, musical, and dramatic productions that will further the knowledge and appreciation of the culture and heritage of the United States. The theater is dedicated to maintaining standards of artistic excellence, celebrating and illuminating the human condition, reaching a large audience of all ages, including families, and fostering a humanistic work environment with adequate and appropriate emotional, financial, and creative support for all of those associated with us. Now, I have served on countless numbers of boards, and this is by far the best mission statement that I have ever seen. Also, this organization has worked tirelessly to maintain this mission statement and the quality of the work that's presented for all of the people who come to see the fine musical productions. My guess is everybody at this table has seen an AFT or Northern Sky production. And that we foster a humanistic work environment is exactly what Katie spoke to a moment ago. This is a mission that's worth supporting. We would like to support it with this wonderful piece of property. Being good stewards of this property, I believe, is inherent within this mission statement. And with that, I will end. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Yes.
My name is Gwen Grayboys, Graboyes, 5343 South Lake Road, Sturgeon Bay. My husband and I have been supporting the current Northern Sky Theater for over 20 years. We moved here about 8 months ago to set up permanent residence and for me to work in Sturgeon Bay. We were alerted through through knowing members of the board and their staff about the desire to acquire this property. I did write a letter, which I believe has been distributed, so I'm not going to spend an inordinate amount of time going over those other points. I understand the worst case scenario issue is really foremost on most people's minds. I think that a different way of looking at this is you have a known commodity that has been a strong asset for the Door County community and the arts. And it's like a bird in hand versus two in the bush. Even with the Countryside 5 designation, you don't know who may choose to purchase that land and do what with it. That potentially putting a church there would have more traffic than this current use. I also believe, and I will strongly support Stella Maris, that if for some reason this passes into the zoning for general commercial, but cannot make the final hurdle into the conditional use for a fine arts venue, I will support strongly turning this back to Countryside 5, because while I don't live adjacent to the property, I would not want to have an amusement park go up there either. I think that destroys a beautiful piece of land and surrounding areas. I realize it's not easy to get zonings changed, but I know that it is possible.
Questions?
Any questions?
Okay,
thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Yes.
Hello, my name is Nancy Sargent. I live at 9049 Gibraltar Bluff Road, Fish Creek. And while I've been listening to a number of I've been listening very carefully to this discussion, I have 2 points, possibly 3, 2 points that I'd like to bring up to you for you to think about. I worked on the smart growth plan for the town of Gibraltar. We were either the first or very early township, the first township to start to develop a smart growth plan. I think that we were in the learning process, as everyone was with the smart growth plans throughout the county, and possibly we didn't make every point correctly. I remember there was a lot of discussion over this area out here as to whether it should be commercial or remain country. And that discussion went on through a number of meetings. And in my opinion, for this corner, I think we made a mistake. That's my opinion. You look down the roads both ways, as has been noted, and there's a lot of commercial. That's one point I'd like to make. The other point I'd like to make is that there are similar rural venues in the area. Peninsula Players, 80 years old. Hands On, Birch Creek. So there are venues of this kind in our rural areas. So it's not an unusual venue. There is a venue just down the road that is country, and yet they have 10 musical events a year. So I am completely in favor of this wonderful ability to do this. I think that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Yes?
My name is Holly Feldman. I live at 743 North 5th Avenue in Sturgeon Bay. There's just one thing I wanted to add that hadn't been brought up yet, and that is a concern that came up at one of the last meetings about what our ideas are right now and what the future holds in sort of this worst case scenario thing. And while Jeff talked a little bit about the next generation, I work full-time for Northern Sky Theater. I'm the Director of Development and Public Relations. I have a family with 3 children that live in Sturgeon Bay. My husband owns his own business and is a landscape designer. I feel that, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, that I am part of that future of this company, and I'm part of it now, and I foresee being a person that would caretake this vision and into the foreseeable future. So there was just a little concern at the last meeting about what about when the next board or the next employees or staff comes along, and I hope to be a part of that. And I grew up watching American Folklore Theater as a little kid in the audience, and I came here to foster the future of this company. So I want you to have that assurance in your mind, at least from people like me, like Katie. My coworker Ann Bernstein also has a family in Sister Bay, and we are here and are permanent. So
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Questions? No? Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Yes, sir.
Paul Osborne, 3583 North Junction Road, Egg Harbor. And I just want to state that after having reviewed the proposals as I've seen them so far, I think they meet the majority of the criteria that you have to look at objectively in order to make this change and fully support its change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak in favor? No? Are there any new letters in support?
We did receive a letter from the town, of course.
That's not in support.
The letters are in the packet.
Two separate packets.
Yes.
Did everybody have time to look at the second packet?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Then there's nothing new in
Okay.
favor.
Mr. Chairman, before
Yes.
we move to opposition, we take a brief recess.
Sure, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
We're back in session. All right, ready to go?
Yep.
All right, is there anybody wishing to speak against the proposal? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Mike Mitterman. I live at 3355 County F, and I'm the little notch cut out of that square.
You're speaking in here?
Yes.
Okay.
My little acre and a half was created before county zoning for the town. And when they were talking about Countryside 5, I was very worried about having to get permits and all this. And I was being, I was assured that, that I would not be affected by that. But knowing that this parcel at most would be 3 separate lots, and maybe 2 of them could touch my property. And on 5 acres, 1 house, 2.5 people on average, or 2 adults and 2.5 kids, is a lot different than having a 200-seat performing venue for 5 to 6 weeks in the fall. I worry that it's a business and they want this to be general commercial property. It's larger in size than the existing general commercial properties in the neighborhood. It will be the focus of that intersection as being a general commercial area. And I disagree with Mrs. Sargent in that the general feeling of the residents in that area when the smart growth planning was being discussed, that the residents wanted to maintain rural residential characteristics in that area. So to change the zoning to general commercial, how does that affect the other properties at that intersection? Do they get sold and people want to change that category to general commercial and make it a larger area? Down in just to the east of us is another intersection that used to be called Maple Grove. Does Maple Grove rise from the ashes and we get another commercial area within the town of Gibraltar? It worries me. It's a business, and businesses want to grow and want to make a profit. They're related in that if the profit isn't there, if business is falling off, there's a portion of property here that's now subdividable into a lot of generally commercial lots adjacent to mine. And how does that affect my property values as a single house in the neighborhood? The Greenwood Supper Club, of the properties that are zoned commercial right now, the Supper Club is probably the only building that looks like a commercial property. The rest of the properties have either houses or cottages on them, but they were zoned commercial so that they could have a business going on. So my wife and I were opposed to the zoning change If the current zoning could stay and could support the arts venue, probably wouldn't, that would probably still be acceptable to us. Because even if they were able to sell off property, it would still be a residential 5 acres somewhere between their buildings and mine. And I don't know if even if that could happen. But there are just too many permitted and conditional uses in the general commercial zoning district that just aren't acceptable to us.
Okay, any questions for the applicant?
Just a clarification, then, make sure I understand this correctly, then. You're absolutely against the rezoning,
I'm against the rezoning.
but the proposed functional use of that property, which of course, until it really comes before anybody, is non-existent, but the proposed discussed use, you're not necessarily opposed to.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you're not sitting here in opposition to both of them.
I've worked with the theater when it was AFT, when I worked for the Village of Ephraim. I helped them get infrastructure in the Village Hall in the Village of Ephraim. I've had a son get married on their stage. My daughter worked for them as a volunteer.
Yes, I was just looking to see what your opinion was
It's a
on it.
fine organization. I'm just against the change in zoning in that neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak against the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak against the proposal? No. We do have a letter against it from the town.
There's 2 letters.
And, yes, and a letter,
From the gentleman.
yeah.
You had one letter against the proposal that should have been in the packets that you saw online, and we have 2 that came today, one from the town of Gibraltar recapping their meeting from last night, and then one from Mr. Bitterman and his wife.
Okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mr. Scary, but as a town rep, do you want to?
First time, sir.
Oh, I've never put you on the spot before. Would you want to comment or not?
No, I don't.
That's fine.
No, I think the letter stands for itself.
Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, then we will go to rebuttal. Is there anybody, and for expediency, like I said, I don't mean to shut anybody off, but please, 10 people coming up and saying the same thing isn't necessary. But if 1, 2, or 3 want to rebut anything of his testimony, or have you all seen the letter, or you know of the turn down from the town?
Yes,
They do? If anybody wants to rebut that, they are able to. So is there anybody that wants to speak in rebuttal? You don't have to,
Ken, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Did anyone other than you see the letter from the town, or that just came today?
That came, we all have a copy of
I
it.
know, but in the audience.
You have seen it, okay. So if you want to speak in rebuttal to this gentleman's testimony or the letters in opposition, you can do that. So if you'd like to, just come on up.
Nancy Sargent, do I need to give you?
Yes, the address again.
Oh, okay, 9049 Gibraltar Bluff Road, Fish Creek. I'd like to make one clarification in regard to Mr. Mitterman. We were at a committee, and that's where the discussion was. I didn't interview any of the surrounding people around that property. It was at the Smart Growth Planning Committee, and that's where we were having the discussion about whether it should be commercial.
Okay.
And of course, that was, if it's like any other smart growth, that was held as a public meeting, which anybody could participate.
That's right.
Could attend.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in rebuttal? All right. Then,
Dave, you're not gonna speak again?
I think I addressed most of the issues in the letter previously,
okay.
so I'm just glancing over it.
I'm just picking on Dave because he's the one that's been the main communicator with
Right,
my
right.
department.
I didn't hear you.
I said I was picking on you because you're the one that's been the main contact to the planning department. Anybody else that spoke can speak.
Right.
Okay. You don't have to. I mean, don't feel you have to. If you feel you've made your case and everything's been said, that's fine.
Do you have any questions of the organization?
We really shouldn't be talking like this. If you want to talk, then you come up here. You have to come up here if we're going to talk. That's why I asked if there's somebody that wants to speak.
It's got to be in reference to the
It's in reference to the testimony, his or the letter from the town.
I understand. All I would like to know is that if you have any other questions of the organization that address issues of use or issues of concern that the community has voiced this afternoon.
No.
No? Okay, thank you.
All right, and there's nobody else wishing to speak in rebuttal, then we do need to give the opposition a chance. You get a chance, because you spoke against it, if you want to rebut what they said. Every side gets 2 shots at it. Okay, all right, good. That being said, we'll move on to the town, okay? Are we okay then?
We're good.
All right, we'll move on to the town. Thank you all for your testimony, by the way. Well, Town of Sebastopol, Jason, yeah, I thought you said wait.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Jason Brower requests a conditional use permit as required by sections 2.05 sub 3 and A, 4.05 sub 3, and 11.04 to establish a 5-acre non-metallic mine in the southern section of the 42-acre parcel. The property is located at 4973 County Highway P in Section 23, Town 28 North, Range 26 East, and in the Countryside or CS zoning district.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I had
Now would be the time?
Now would be the time.
Okay.
That's correct. Based on my position in the Village of Sister Bay as president of Sister Bay, we currently have some litigation regarding the non-metallic mine in Sister Bay. So I'm going to remove myself from this proceedings for the purpose of, I don't want anything that I would say or do or decision I would make reflect on anything that may happen with the litigation that's in place in the non-metallic mine in Sister Bay. It has nothing to do with this applicant, nothing to do with this proposal.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll give my disclaimer. I have a non-metallic mine, but I am a stone quarry, not a gravel pit. There's a difference. I take out custom stone for building purposes and do fine work. I don't crush anything on my property. So it's a totally different operation. All right?
Except that yesterday your saw was broken.
The new part is coming. I got good news. We'll be back in business by next week. But just so that everybody knows that is the situation. All right, go ahead.
Very good, thank you. So the property that we're talking about is located centrally in the town of Sebastopol in the community of Institute. Here's the property with a star right here, community of Institute. Let me grab it's located west of Highway 57 and located north of Rip Road and south of County P. The parcel, as you can see, is irregular in shape, and I'm sorry my cursor's wiggling around. What is being proposed is to establish a 5-acre non-metallic mine within the Countryside zoning district. The mine would include blasting and rock crushing, the products from which would be used to create gravel for construction sites. The final look of the property after the reclamation of the mine has taken place is to result in a wildlife pond. The property, as you can see, is rather large. It's just over 42 acres in size. It has 985 feet of frontage on Rip Road and 106 feet of road frontage on County P. The existing uses on site currently, there's a single-family residence with an attached storage building and accessory structures and an unauthorized trading contractor establishment, which is an excavating business located in the prime egg zoning district. And I'm going to have you go to...
Did you say unauthorized?
Yes. I'm going to have you go to the zoning map. This property is somewhat unique.
What page are we on?
Page 92.
Okay.
This property is somewhat unique in that the southern portion of the property is zoned countryside, the gray color here. The northern portion of the property is zoned prime agricultural. You'll also note that in the community of Institute, the town has designated with this orange line the core area. So you'll also see that the core area bisects the property at an angle as well.
Question about that?
You bet.
And the non-metallic mine would be bisected by that core area line too?
Yes, the mine, if I could keep a steady hand here, the mine is going to be centrally located in the bottom portion of the property. The remainder of the property was recently planted in trees, seedlings, I believe last year sometime. Currently, the residential access to the property, and I think we'll switch back to the air photo on 93 now, comes in from the north and serves the home. Access proposed for the non-metallic mine is proposed to come out on the southeast corner of the property, which is an easement to the adjacent property, to the east tank, I believe is how you pronounce the property owner's name. County Highway P has fairly high levels of traffic, and Rip Road having lesser traffic there. As far as topography, the majority of the property was an agricultural field prior to the home and prior to planting of the trees. There's a 50-foot drop in elevation from the northeast portion of the property, northeast of the home, down to the southeast portion of the property, with the steepest slopes being right adjacent to the home. I'm going to go back to the zoning map on page 92. And as you can see in this area, both to the north and to the west, as well as the far east, the majority of the town is zoned prime ag with wetlands intermixed. However, to the east, in this area here, you'll see the majority of that property is zoned single-family residential 20,000 and mixed-use commercial. The parcels are divided in this area and contain about 48 smaller lots made up of residential homes, a few vacant lots, and some businesses. About 70% of those lots are currently developed. This area, I'm sure, is familiar to you. The town hall is to the east along the highway, as well as the school in that area. Directly to the south, there are 11 residential lots. It is zoned estate right here. These homes are located on the southernmost portion of the core area. And then beyond that, obviously, is prime ag. To the west, primarily agricultural land. There are several homes along Rip Road to the west, and there is an existing non-metallic mine, if I can get my laser here, along Matthey, just south of Rip Road here. That predates zoning, although you may be familiar with that because the committee did authorize a temporary asphalt plant not too long ago on that road. It's about 3/4 of a mile to the west there.
How big is that?
The mine
Yeah.
or the temporary asphalt plant?
The mine.
Okay, the mine, I believe, is on 240s.
80 acres?
Correct. I don't know that it takes up the entire 80. I haven't looked at that site for a while. So back in 2002, the home was authorized with the attached storage building. While discussing the non-metallic mining application, it came to our attention that the applicant was running a trading contractor establishment from the storage building. We have discussed and have given correspondence with the owner outlining options on how to have that authorized and giving a date for compliance for that. As far as the zoning district goes, the area where the mine is proposed to be located is in the countryside district. This is intended for mostly rural areas of the interior of the county, where a mixture of low-density residential, ag, and rural commercial activities exists or is desirable. It provides for residential development at modest densities, consistent with rural environmental, and allows for non-residential uses which require relatively large areas and are compatible with the surrounding rural land. Let's see here. As far as the intent, it's up to the committee to determine if this use is appropriate for the location. And then as far as all our staff reports, if the committee decides that the proposed use in this proposed location will not be contrary to public interest or will not be detrimental or injurious to the public health, safety, or character of the surrounding area, we have listed some conditions that you may want to consider. We also looked back in other non-metallic mining conditional use permits to pull similar conditions for your information. So things to consider could be set hours of operation of the mine, set hours of operation with regard to blasting, hours with regard to when the rock crushing could happen. The ordinance states that rock crushing shall not take place before 6 a.m. nor after 7 p.m. unless timeframes are approved by the RPC. And then one thing we wanted to point out, although landscape buffers are not required by the ordinance, a non-metallic mine does have a higher impact rating than the surrounding area, and the committee may want to consider placing a condition to establish landscape buffer from large piles of the excavated material. All berms constructed on site shall be covered with vegetation within 30 days of creation. Equipment with potential of leaking contaminants shall utilize measures that ensure that those contaminants will not contact the surface of the ground or the groundwater. On-site petroleum storage shall be within a covered containment unit, which is designed and utilized so as to allow no overflow or spillage onto the surface of the ground or into the water. Dust shall be controlled on internal roads with an environmentally acceptable material that comply with the EPA. Applicant shall submit to the planning department copies of EPA or any state approvals. Obviously applying or complying with local, state, and federal codes. RPC may want to address access or traffic issues related to usage off County P versus RIP Road. I know with the temporary asphalt plant on Matthew Road, that was one of the town's concerns, that they didn't want truck traffic on the RIP Road. The use shall be established within 12 months. And then, as always with these types of conditional use applications, the committee needs to set a completion date, or establish a completion date. So that's what I have for you for the zoning. I'm going to turn it over to Mariah for the planning considerations.
Can I ask Sue
Sure,
a question
sure.
first? In this case, when we talk about a completion date,
Mm-hmm.
are we talking about that the whole thing is in operation or that it has been completed and reclaimed?
Reclaimed.
Okay.
I think he's anticipating 10 years, and the applicant can speak to that, but yes, that's exactly what that means.
All right, I'm gonna walk you through the comprehensive plan stuff that was in your packet quickly, and then we also have Greg Coulter's here, and I'm gonna come up now and sit for a minute afterward. Greg Coulter's works for the Door County Soil and Water Conservation Department. He's gonna explain to the committee the reclamation plan process, because that's entirely handled by their department, and I thought that might be useful information for you to have. So as far as the comprehensive plan, as Sue pointed out on the map, this property is partially located within a core area. And as you know, core areas are intended for higher density and intensity uses, mixture of residential, commercial, government, institutional, etc. So a quarry is not a use that's probably envisioned by or consistent with the guidelines for a core area. Again, that's for half of the property. The entire parcel, both the part that's in the core area and the remainder of the parcel, are shown on the future land use map as rural/agricultural. And as Sue pointed out previously, the committee will have to decide if the proposed use can be made consistent with that future land use designation and with this neighborhood. And if yes, do that via conditions attached to the permit. Institute also has sort of a bubble, I would call it, that the town had requested to have on the map. That's sort of an amorphous place where they wanted mixed commercial and residential development that may or may not have been able to be interpreted as including part of this property, but I don't think the town addressed that in their letter, so I think we can assume that it's not one of the areas that they considered to be mixed commercial and residential. So that's all I had, but I'm going to turn it over to Greg to talk about mine reclamation.
Okay. Again, my name is Greg Coulthers. I work for the Door County Soil and Water Office, and I administer the non-metallic mining reclamation program. There's about 51 permitted mines currently in Door County. All of those mines, whether it's gravel pits or quarries, are inspected at least annually, sometimes more often if needed. One of my roles for this program is when a new proposal is submitted, I go through the application process, review all the standards, the state standards, the county ordinance, etc. And when we get to this point where we have a nearly complete plan, we have to make sure that all the other permits and permissions are in order. So if zoning is part of it, we have to make sure we have the zoning approval, otherwise we cannot authorize or permit the reclamation permit. Other steps that need to take place would be the stormwater permitting through the DNR. So when I was working with this project, we got to the point where, okay, where are we at with zoning? Do we have the zoning approval yet or not? So that's really the next step that we need to have happen, is if it's going to be a permitted operation, then we move forward with the reclamation plans. So basically, all of the plans, they have to be, there's safety for groundwater, there's safety for water quality, water quantity, a whole bunch of natural resource rules and protections. So most of that has been gone through, and basically we're at where we are now. So questions or?
Actually, not necessarily a reclamation question, but can somebody blast to put a pond in now?
You mean just
If
not
they
as
want to
part
put
of
a pond in
mine?
their property, can they blast?
They need permits from us and probably from Soil and Water, and depending on where it is, maybe from the DNR also.
The difference for building a pond and mining is basically there's a 1 acre rule. So if there's an acre of disturbance,
That's the DNR regulation, right?
well, that's for stormwater, where a stormwater plan is there. But for this one, if you have an acre of disturbance and material leaves the site, you are mining. If you have less than an acre and material leaves the site, it is not mining under the reclamation ordinance. Now, if you make a 5 acre pond and leave all the material on site and never sell it, it's not mining. You just built a pond. But the intent here is to mine the material, sell the material, and
Yeah.
reclaim it as a pond.
Yeah, I'm just curious, if somebody wanted to build a 5 acre pond, obviously rock would either be placed somewhere on the property or plain removed, but they can do that, correct?
Sure. We've had ponds go in that had to get a reclamation plan because they sold material. We've had ponds go in that did not sell the material, that did not need a reclamation.
Yeah, so it comes down to, the reclamation aspect comes down to whether or not the materials leave the property in the creation of the pond.
And the size of the disturbance.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And are you saying Mr. Brower has an accepted reclamation plan already?
No, I am not. We have a plan that's in draft form that is nearing completion. And one of the items that I had on there yet that needs to be resolved is if it is permitted through zoning, is the driveway on the right side of the mine. And that's the Rip Road County piece. So if currently it's on Rip Road, if one of the conditions are you need to exit on County P, then that reclamation plan needs to be amended.
Oh,
If there are other conditions by the RPC put in place, then I gotta make sure those are addressed in the reclamation plan.
Question.
Go ahead.
So in this memo you have in the packet here, there's the final paragraph says typical steps to start a non-metallic mine. I'm assuming that all of that doesn't really you don't go through those steps in a final form until we've made our decision.
There's a cart and there's a horse, and a lot of times they're not always in the same order, and it all depends on the situation. So, part of this would be, if we went to the RPC first without even coming to me, it would be, well, do you have a reclamation plan drafted? No, we'll come back until you have a drafted one. So there is a draft out there, it's nearing completion, and it's to the point now where we need to be on the same page.
Do this before you continue
Right.
with a
I can't approve it
reclamation
until,
hearing and a stormwater permit and all of that
Right.
comes
So,
next.
if we have if they get the permit to operate, we finalize the reclamation plan, then the next might be a conditional approval upon stormwater management plan being approved by the state and financial assurance being in place. So
And it talks about a reclamation hearing.
there is the potential for a hearing for reclamation purposes. In that case, once we do have a complete plan, we would put a notice out in the paper, and that would go to also all residents within 1,000 feet. And if it would be out there for 30 days, it's a Class 1 notice. If one of those landowners requests a hearing, we have to schedule that hearing within 30 to 60 days, and then the hearing will be just about reclamation activities. So if somebody were to come to the hearing and say, I don't want them to blast, I'm sorry, I cannot deal with that. That's an operational activity.
Who holds the hearing?
We would,
The Land Conservation Committee?
the SWCD.
Okay, any other questions? We're great. Okay, thank you, Greg. Any other questions on any of this? Otherwise, would the applicant please step forward?
My name is Pete Hirth. I work for Bodwin Incorporated. I'm a licensed engineer. We represent Jason and Kendall Brower. They're the property owners. And I've been handling the reclamation and the engineering portion of it so far. So what I'll do, I'm going to keep this brief, but I'm going to run through quickly some of the steps that we've taken and kind of where we are at this point. And Jason will introduce himself also in case he needs to have some rebuttal if there's questions that come up. So,
Just a second. Just so there's no confusion, we call for the applicant first.
Or his representative?
And so this is okay? All right.
All right. So as Sue explained, he owns 43 acres. What we tried to do to minimize impact to neighbors is we took 5 acres right in the middle of the property, and that's what we're proposing. So the plan at this point, the process we've gone through to date, like Greg Colthurst has said, we went out and surveyed the site. We shot grades throughout the site. We came up with a reclamation plan, developed a proposed grading plan, presented that to Greg, worked up a value amount for the letter of credit that Jason would have to submit to the county to assure that the site gets reclaimed as we propose. If he would default on that, the county would have the funds to do that. The end use of the site is a pond. So he does plan on lining the bottom of the pond to create a permanent pool to make it look nice, and eventually he'd like to build a home overlooking that pond, or potentially even with the countryside zoning, we could do some lots that surround it and have the view of the pond. Jason is a one-man construction company. So this, I think one of the things we tried to present to the town, which maybe did not get through, is this is a little bit different than saying we're going to open up a 40-acre mine and there's going to be trucks in and out every day and there's going to be 10 employees there. It's going to be Jason. The amount of material that Jason uses in a year in his construction business is between 7,000 and 10,000 cubic yards a year. So we're projecting that this is about a 10-year quantity for his project, for his construction business. And we're projected that we can do all the blasting needed each year in a 3-day period. So 3 days a year would actually be the blasting portion. And then the crushing portion to create the materials that he would use, we're estimating about a 15-day set up a crusher and do it to generate that volume of material.
Per season.
Right, per year. So I guess one of the perceptions we're trying to discuss here is it's a little bit different than a large operation. It's going to be him loading his truck, getting in his truck, driving to the job site, doing his job. So hauling loads out as he needs them to do his job. The reason we chose Rip Road was Rip Road is the shorter route. We don't have to drive as far. And Rip Road, where we exit, there's an existing driveway there that serves this farm here that's actually on Jason's property. So it's a real short run to Highway 57. So that's the reason it was chosen. If need be, if we had to go all the way up to County P around his home and go out that way, it's an option. It's not as preferred, but he could live with that if that's a sticking point. As far as the concerns at the town, I'd like to, I guess, address those. You'll hear it today from some neighbors. Obviously, endangering wells in the area is a big concern. The noise and the blasting is a big concern. Hopefully, the amount of days that we're talking about here eases some of that concern. The wells themselves, the bottom of our quarry is proposed to be 60 feet above the permanent water level found in the wells in the area. All wells in the area, as part of statute, have to be 170 feet of casing. We're going to be 60 feet above any aquifer level. So we feel comfortable with that, along with the restoration of the pond with a clay liner in the bottom. Should negate some of those concerns. One concern was stormwater entering the open excavation, because there is some water that drains through here. So part of the plan is to actually create when we push the topsoil off, create a small diversion so that water does not enter the open pit as it's being blasted and as it's being utilized as a quarry. We'll route that around. As to, again, do what we can to protect any impact. As Sue mentioned, this is a conditionally, we're not asking for any rezoning. It is allowed in the countryside district, so we feel like placing it on the south half of the property makes the most sense because it is in the countryside zoning district. As she did mention, he has planted small pine tree nurseries surrounding this entire thing. So obviously they're small at this point, but eventually they are going to somewhat hide this from view as those trees grow. Again, there is a quarry about 3/4 mile away that Northeast Asphalt is using. It's a much larger scale than this. Obviously, they're not using Rip Road is one of their conditions, but it is in the area, so we feel it's somewhat already established in the area. The decreased property value, I understand the neighbors' concerns. I guess the point we're making here is eventually it's going to be a beautiful pond. And if the goal of the core area of the town is to place smaller residential homes, this would certainly accomplish that 10 years out. It would create a great setting for if Jason decides just to build his own home or if he decides to split some lots. At this point, his goal is to build his own home. I guess just to touch on the business use, not to get into that a whole lot because it's not really part of this, but Jason's trying to, if we can get this approved, the easy answer is move the operation down into the mine site boundaries, and then he can have his truck or equipment stored here, and then it is a conforming use to the mine. He wouldn't have to store it by his house, which is part of the issue there. So that's one of the goals of this is if we get this approved, we move everything down and then we're conforming. So that's kind of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer questions now or at rebuttal.
Sue,
What is that land what is it like right now?
It's a farm field. I think it was an alfalfa field when we originally dug the holes and surveyed it. But again, it's all trees all the way around it, small nursery.
Okay, Don?
What is the weight limit on Rip Road?
That I don't know. I don't know what the weight limit is on Rip.
Good.
So he doesn't intend to own any or maintain any blasting equipment or crushing equipment on site? He
No,
intends to
he-
hire somebody in?
No, he would likely own his own at some
So he'd
point.
bring his
here.
own equipment
Right.
in?
He'll do his own blasting?
Nope, not his own blasting, but his own crushing.
Okay.
And again, a licensed blaster would do it, so any neighbor concerns as far as impact to basements or anything, again, we're greater than 300 feet to anyone's home,
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask.
and certainly the blaster would have to do the videotaping and the insurance route, and, you know, there's assurances that go into the neighbors as far as any damage to their property.
Okay, so you're 300 feet to the nearest home. All those lines represent different depths. He's going down gradually. He's not sinking a straight deep
Right.
hole down.
It's a 5-to-1 slope, which
Mhm.
is about,
Okay.
you know, if this table's 10 feet long, you tip it up 2 feet, so it looks steeper on paper.
Yep, yep.
We're going down about 20 feet below existing grade,
Okay, but all gradual.
all gradual.
Okay, that makes a big difference as far as the blasting goes, what anybody would notice. Because they do blasting in the couple quarries next to me. And if they're gonna blast and I wanna watch it, I have to ask them when they're gonna do it because I can't hear it. It's that quiet. They've got it down to a science now, I know that. And if he takes it out gradually, I know that he won't be doing a lot of shaking of the ground. On a
Right.
gradual basis, it's not gonna, you dig down 40 feet and start blasting, then you're gonna shake things up. But to do it gradually like that, that's not that
We
bad.
we were kind of figuring the quantities, and we figured 100 feet by 100 foot. If we did that in 1 year and went down to 20 feet at the bottom, that would give us the amount, so we could shoot that in 3 days
Yeah.
and get at it all year.
Okay.
Can you describe somebody's well they feel is contaminated because of blasting? What is the typical current regulations in that respect?
Well, what we did, because we knew this was a concern going into the town meeting, we contacted a lady named Janelle Mary at the DNR. She's Green Bay office well person. And we said, okay, we're doing this. Is this common that neighbors' wells gets contaminated? And the answer was no. Not at all. That she'd worked there for 3 or 4 years, and I don't know. We talked to one person. Jason has his own residential house, near the site. He has a residential well. As part of this, we would certainly monitor his well, and if he would be the first closest impact, so we'd certainly, do quarterly monitoring or monitoring after blasting or whatever, as far as any kind of contamination that would be reaching a well.
And you said how many tons per year he's gonna blast? Could you give me those
He would
numbers
go.
again?
He would go with between 7 and 10,000 cubic yards.
Wait, 7 to 10,000?
That'd be cubic yards.
All right, I'm gonna need a calculator.
As far as tonnage, I think you multiply that by about 1.5, don't you? So you'd
What do
be
you
at
figure for weight? 166 to 168 pounds per cubic foot is what I know.
1.3, something like that, yeah.
Okay.
So it'd be what, 15,000 ton?
How many ton you figure?
At the most, 15,000.
15,000 ton. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. Would anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal, please step forward.
My name is Jason Brower, 4973 County Road P. I am the owner of the property and the owner of the project that we're trying to get established here. I'm just here because if Pete has to go, I just want to talk at the rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? No? Are there any letters in favor?
I have no letters in
No
favor.
letters in favor. Okay, then we'll go to the opposition. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposal? Please step forward.
My name is L. George Evenson. And if you could take that map back to the long yellow line that's was there a few minutes ago? To the map with the detailed map with the Breyer property and my property. Jason and I share that yellow line that runs on the west side of his
Point
property.
of order, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, my name
Yes.
Address?
What?
Address?
4994 Rip Road.
Okay.
And that's an adjacent property line. This past April, I completed a deal of selling 20 acres of land to a neighbor that is bounded by Mr. Breyer and my common line on the east side as a 20-acre tract. And on that 20-acre tract, in order that it could be sold and accomplish what we had sought to do with it, is that it was a conservancy easement was put on that land. The idea was then that land would be, it's roughly in the lower right hand, there you go, right in that area.
The irregular shape.
Where the rectangular shape,
This area.
and that's immediately adjacent to Mr. Breyer's property. We created a conservancy easement there, and the idea that someday that he could build a home on that property. However, since the property was sold, there had been this proposal for the quarry, and thus part of our opposition is based on what one can imagine would happen to a piece of property that was listed adjacent to a quarry. The other thing is that I would like to draw attention to is that I not only own the property adjacent to Mr. Breyer's property, but I also own the property that would be extended further to the north, another 200 acres north of that.
Here?
The point is that it's been stated a number of times by folks that how you're going to fill the pond, and it's going to be done with runoff and this sort of thing. If we go back to that other chart again, I could show you that the runoff that's going to fill his pond is going to come off from my property. There's a ditch right across the road from where that double driveway is there that handles all of the runoff from the 40 acres that are north of County Trunk P, across that open field, right down in the direction of Mr. Breyer's pond. I don't want to be forced to go through a lot of regulations in order to assure that the water in his pond is going to be pure, because I couldn't do it. That water is running across sometimes 80 acres. There's a ditch right across the road from my property that I put in. It runs there. It runs off into that field. I think you can see the outline of it. That directs the water directly toward the slope of the land, is right toward his pond. So I don't think that would be conducive to filling a pond, and I can't imagine the pond being filled with a garden hose. So I think that there would be a major problem there as far as supplying the water in the long run. I don't think it would be possible. The other thing is that there are quite a number of homes in the area, including mine, that we feel that, I think there's something like 24, or I think the number is 12 homes on Rip Road and up on where my house is, in that lower rectangle on the end of my property. There are 3 homes in that area. And we feel, and I think I can say that safely, that the people that built their homes in that area, paid for those homes and have an investment in that area, certainly have the right to be concerned about decreasing the value of their homes because of an operating quarry, even if it's for only 10 years. It's going to have an effect on property values. It's going to diminish the value of their property, and it's going to be detrimental to the community. I served as the chairman of this committee back in for 10 years in 1970. And of course, at that time, people brought stones, tomatoes, eggs, and that sort of thing to throw at the committee members. You haven't experienced that yet.
Close though, a couple times.
It could happen. But it could happen. But the point is, the whole concept of zoning and planning is not to ensure the compatibility of neighborhoods, but to ensure that elements do not enter into that neighborhood that somehow or other diminishes the value and upsets the commonality of that neighborhood. So therefore, I am very much opposed to this. Jason is a good neighbor. I hate to have this come up and have to take a position that I have to take on this, and it's not in my own selfish interest, but I think it's the interest of a lot of people in the community. My property, because I have a long boundary line with him, and I think it would be nothing but confusion and trouble if he's trying to maintain the level of that pond with the runoff of my property. I don't feel it's possible. And I don't think the people that designed this didn't really take that into much consideration, because there's been nobody walking on my property checking out how the water runs. So I think this is something we have to be concerned about. This is a letter that I was given by a neighbor, was able to get it posted, but that pretty much concludes my remark. I think this particular case is a good example of what zoning is all about. And I think it'd be compatible with good planning, good zoning, if this particular project, despite it happens to be with my neighbor, if this particular project would not be approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just any questions? Any questions? No, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak against the proposal? Yes, sir.
My name is Fred Erickson. I live at 4987 Rip Road. Our property is to the southwest corner, directly just south of that, right there.
Oops.
We were there.
Oh, we're right down here.
Yeah, and that first 5-acre parcel there, directly south of his property is also ours. My wife Marilyn and I have lived there since 1988 in that location. We've gone to the other meetings before, and just to reiterate to you guys, we don't have any personal grudge against Jason or anything of the sort. He's been a good neighbor to us in the past. So I've bought a 4-minute statement, if it's okay with you guys. As you're aware, on May 11th, the Sevastopol Plan Commission heard from the people of Sevastopol, and the Plan Commission recommended unanimously to the town board to reject his request to create a 5-acre mine. On May 18th, the entire board of the town of Sevastopol rejected this request as well. This board was elected to represent the residents of Sevastopol, and they did just that. They voted to reject an idea that would benefit only one family to the detriment of the well-being of the rest of the community, which surrounds this area. His proposal to dig this mine so close to the small town of Institute is contrary to the interests of the people of Sevastopol. As I looked at the Sevastopol plan, comprehensive plan, which was done in 2008, in 2006, they held a kickoff meeting, and the participants were asked to identify the values that people influence people to remain, take pride in, and become actively involved in this community. These people stated that there was they wanted a strong sense of community. They respected a small, quiet town atmosphere, a relaxed lifestyle, an absence of large commercial development, picturesque vistas of farm fields, meadows, woods, orchards, and water, and clean drinking water. That's what they valued. A good vista of farm fields. So, after that comprehensive plan, I lost my train of thought here, but his proposal to dig the mines was contrary to the interests of the people of Sevastopol. And this was made crystal clear by the many residents who showed up at these meetings, at the 2 meetings that I mentioned before. I believe that the only people who have come to speak in favor of the mine have been Jason and his engineer. So far, I believe that to be the case. I'm fearful of the destruction of our water supply. All the residents in this area are on wells. We don't have city water. In addition to the possibility of ruining our water, as George stated, I know our property values are gonna decrease if this mine goes in. You may have a mine on your property, you may run a mine, but I think newly married couples are not gonna look at my house and say, gosh, I'd love to live across the street from a quarry. I don't think that's gonna happen. I have with me several aerial photos which I took from the web map from Door County's site here, which I'd like to offer to you folks. And I just guesstimated, forgive me if I didn't get it exactly right, guesstimated the center of the property, the quarry there, and with a quarter-mile radius of the center of that, there's about 16 homes within a quarter-mile radius of it. And I may not have it exactly right, okay? If you expanded that to a half a mile, it includes the Sevastopol School, the Town Hall, and probably 3 dozen homes. Contrasting to that, I have aerial photos of the Matthew Road quarry. Quarter-mile radius of that, there are no homes within a quarter mile of the center of it. And within a half a mile, there are 2 homes. That's where a quarry belongs. It doesn't belong in the center of a residential area. I know it's zoned, I know they've jumped through the hoops to do what they want, but it's just not right. It's not the right place for it. Another issue I have is that while Jason states that his hours of operation would be from 6 to 6 or from 6 a.m. to till sundown, he also plans to have a nice pond there when he's done mining, and he also only plans to dig rock for 10 years. And he doesn't plan on having trucks come and haul rock away. Other companies, besides himself, we have no guarantees of that. We already have a situation going past our house on Rip Road where although Northeast Asphalt doesn't haul rock up and down a road, which they're not allowed to do, all their contractors do. So it's all their haulers haul it. So who has a guarantee? Who can guarantee that he's not gonna have other contractors do this? And who's gonna guarantee that he's not gonna be selling to others? We don't have that. I don't know who's gonna police that. Quarries belong away from houses and families. I can't imagine having a rock crushing operation, even if it's going for 3 hours a day across the street from my house, even if it's 1 hour a day. I just can't imagine that being a good thing to do. This mine would change the value and the character of our neighborhood, and I ask you guys to reject this proposal. So I appreciate your time.
Any questions? Here, you don't mind us?
Oh, please, help yourself. And again, if I don't have the exact center of those,
it's fine.
Forgiveness. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak against the proposal? Yes.
Marty Gerber, 4541 Rockridge Road. I sent you a letter. I think everybody got a copy of it. I guess I really would like just to reiterate the things that Mr. Erickson has already said without having to take your time to say them, but to add the fact that I feel that we really need to watch what Mr. Brower does. He's already very actively loud at his residence. I don't know what he's doing, but there is grinding sensations that cause us to sense the earth. I live 350 yards away. He's made loud noises in the past. He had one fire that I thought, I walked through my house to see what was on fire in my house. These are things that have happened in the near past. The last 2 or 3 weeks I've noticed absolutely nothing, but there are big leaves on the trees now and it is more quiet. The 5 acres of trees that he has planted are seedlings. It takes 20 years for a seedling to be 20 feet tall. So 5 acres of seedlings are going to do nothing to keep the air clean for us. So I wouldn't be bragging about that for 20 years. By then, I won't care. But I'd like to just say once more, I'm really opposed to this and hope you vote against it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak against the proposal?
My name is Lee Chapman, and I live at 4517 Rockridge Road. If I can find this chair so I don't... Doesn't like me. Okay. I had submitted a letter. I just wanted to talk about a few other things that I kind of picked up. One was about the intent. And I know at the past 2 town meetings, Mr. Brower was asked about whether or not he was planning on supplying gravel to other contractors. And he said no. But I'm just wondering if that's the case, why is he listed under the yellow pages under gravel suppliers? I don't, that's confusing to me. And when you say construction, he's a excavating contractor. So, which kind of conjured up a little different image in my mind. And the other thing is, I'm just wondering who will assume the responsibility if there is damage to the foundations or the wells or anything. Is he going to be willing to assume any of the responsibility? I guess that's about it. Look at my notes.
All right.
Thank you.
No questions? Anybody else wishing to speak against the proposal? Yes?
Judy Moss, 4559 Rockridge Road. My husband and I live on Rockridge Road, just east and over the hill from Jason. And we are concerned and against the gravel quarry that Jason wants to put in on his property. And we agree with our...
Can you show that
Yeah.
Rockridge
Where's
Road?
Rockridge Road?
Is that subdivision?
Is it within the subdivision? Or do you see
it's
it on
to
there
the
right
east.
now?
Yes.
Is it that yellow
right
road
there?
that's
Yeah, there you
looking
go.
out?
Yeah, that's it.
That's what I thought.
Oh, okay.
That's it, yep. And we agree with our neighbors on Rockridge Road and agree with Rip Road also as to the issues that may cause to our property and the health issues that can cause to us personally. And we would like you to vote against the permit for Jason to establish the non-metallic mine to create gravel on his property. And we just want you to know we're against the drilling, the blasting, the grinding, and any trucks that he would be using for the noise. So, just want to let you know we're against it.
That's fine, that's fine. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else wishing to speak against the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak against the proposal? Yes? Now we're out of time.
You know the guy, take it.
Paul Wiesner, 4957 Rip Road. I could beat a dead horse and go through what everybody did. A concern I have is I have a 5-acre parcel that butts up on the south end of Rip Road on Jason's property. And I have a concern, there's a culvert that goes under Rip Road and it drains onto my property. And you can, talk about controlling surface or groundwater or whatever. But if any of that limestone dust or whatever and you get a heavy rainfall and it ends up on my property, I have a concern about it. That's it.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks, Paul.
You bet.
Anybody else wishing to speak against the proposal? Anybody else wishing to speak against the proposal? Boss, would you like to comment?
No, I believe we sent a letter in there.
Okay. Any new letters against?
We have just the ones that were handed out to you, nothing new to
Nothing
hand
new.
out. There were some
the second
there were
packet.
some in the second packet as well as the first packet, but
Yeah.
none to hand out.
Okay, all right. Mr. Brower or your representative, would either one of you like to rebut the testimony?
Pete Hirth with Bodwin Incorporated. I'll make this real brief. I actually have to be at a graduation for my son in 20 minutes in Sevastopol, so I'm heading out soon. But just to go through a few things, regarding the watershed, we did delineate a watershed that actually feeds the pond as part of the reclamation plan. So I know this isn't what you're typically used to looking at, but this being Jason's property here, 47 acres will feed that pond once it is complete. And actually, a lot of Mr. Evenson's, based on the USGS map, would drain southwesterly. Now, maybe something changed, maybe there's ditch work done, but we feel confident we can, like I talked about, divert the water around the quarry while it's in operation and yet have 47 acres, keep it full with the clay liner once it's completed.
Okay.
Compatibility, yes, that question has come up a lot, and I guess again, to reiterate, 10 years later, we feel it will be compatible because it'd be a nice looking pond. You know, again, like Greg had talked about, if you were doing a 1 acre pond, less than a 1 acre pond, we necessarily wouldn't have to go through the reclamation thing. So Jason is trying to do the right thing. He's spending money to do this. He's trying to follow the rules here. So, you know, he's putting his best foot forward to try to present it to everybody and make it livable. The water supply concerns, I feel I've covered those previously with the well casing depth and the fact we're going to line the bottom of the pond and our DNR conversation. Property values, again, we're greater than 400 feet to Rip Road. The south end of our quarry is greater than 400-foot buffer, greater than 300 feet to the east property lines. We feel like we've tried to center this thing away from the general public as much as possible. So that's what all I have, unless there'd be other questions for me.
Go ahead,
Yes.
Susie.
Talk about size of piles of material. I know you're talking about buffers, but essentially they're pretty small trees. So for a long time, you're gonna see it.
Right.
What kind of size are we talking about?
As far as the piles, if he's going to crush around, even with a really efficient crusher, you're at probably 500 yards a day, and that would be enough to last him, you know, a month or whatever. So the size of the pile would vary. I don't know if I can predict exactly. I'd say the size of this room would be a big pile.
As high as this room?
Right.
Are you asking about the material?
I'm
or
just
the
asking about
berms you'd
height.
build
I'm
around
visualizing other mines.
Piles of gravel.
That do sometimes, and I
Oh,
realize
okay.
that this is maybe not the same kind of operation that we've seen in other parts of the county, but I'm thinking of some that have pretty high piles that are much higher than the houses around them.
Right. Yeah, that'd be hard to predict exactly how high the piles
So it
would
would depend on how tall the elevator is.
Right. Anything else? Others? Thank you.
No, good, thank you. Mr. Brower, did you want to rebut any of the testimony? No? All right. Would any of those that spoke in the negative want to rebut what Mr. Hirth just said? Mr. Evenson?
As the adjacent
We
property,
still need the name.
George L. Evenson, or L. George Evenson, 4994 Rip Road. I would just like to say in regard to the watershed and the movement of surface water in the area, that since I would be a major contributor to the surface water runoff in this area, even though some of it is diverted, I would like a guarantee by this committee, county board, and Mr. Breyer that I will never, ever be charged with contributing contaminated groundwater or surface water to that pond.
Ken will sign that, right?
Of course.
I'm kidding.
I'm not sure, you're saying you want us to guarantee you won't pollute his pond?
I want a guarantee that I will never be charged with polluting that pond.
So you are polluting now?
No, I'm not.
I'm not understanding what you're saying, because.
Why don't you, what don't you
you're already-
understand?
You're already saying that you've got pollutants over your
No,
land
I
that
have.
water's carrying.
What I'm saying is a potential that I have, there's a potential that the groundwater, the surface water on my land could conceivably seek into his pond and contaminate it. And I want an assurance that I will never be charged with any any contaminating either groundwater or his pond.
I see.
If you can do that, I'd be happy.
We'll work on it, Mr. Evenson. Anybody else wishing to rebut the, I keep forgetting his name, Hirth?
Pete Hirth.
Pete Hirth's testimony? Sorry, you had your,
I was just gonna answer her question about the size of the pile. If you did know, that's about it. I just forgot about that, but that's okay.
okay, I'll allow it.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
The size of the pile, like 10.
You
you
gotta
need
come
to
up
get
here.
on the tape.
Jason Brower, 4973 County Road P. The size of the piles would be less than the berms that we have because we actually have more material that has to stay on site for reclamation, and that has to be through soil and water conservation. You have 30 days, I think, to get vegetation after the berm is built to get vegetation onto that, and we did have some problems with neighbors with the size of the piles, like you were saying, and whatnot. And the actual berms are gonna be bigger than the size of the piles, so the berms actually will hide the piles behind them. And we're gonna put them in an area that will shield off or view off neighbors and the road areas, so the only ones that will see it is me at my own place. I did have a conversation with my new neighbor who George sold the land to. On Sunday, he came over and he was concerned about the same thing. And he said, as long as you put a pile on my side, he says, I'm totally fine with it. So there was concerns there, and I said, yep, that's all in the plan. We have everything taken care of in the plan. We're gonna berm up the sides, and it's gonna be a small amount because I can't afford a whole big time of crushing and blasting all at one time. I have to do it at small increments. So that's why it's gonna only be 10,000 yards a year. And 10,000 yards a year split in 3 different piles, which is a small amount. I don't have a lot of stacking conveyors, is what you're talking about. It's all gonna be just loader dumps. So a maximum height is probably 12 feet, is what I'm gonna say.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Now, since I let him say that, I almost have to let others rebut that claim. Everybody gets a fair shot. Anybody want to rebut that? Okay. Then, have we done everything? We've gone through all the letters? Yes, then we'll close this off, and we'll move on to our regular meeting. Let's see. All right. Thank you all for your testimony, by the way.
The audience members can just come up and sit.
What do you?
Have you been sworn in?
I'm just
Okay.
organizing.
Okay, verification of proper notice and posting procedures, quorum present, adoption of agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Okay, well, we took all the public comments, so that's off. Course, and any other correspondence outside the hearing?
No.
Read and act on minutes of May 21st, 2015 meeting.
I move we adopt those minutes.
Second.
Any corrections, additions, changes to that? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed. Okay, zoning matters. 6.1, zoning amendment petition, Stella Maris Parish Corporation on behalf of Northern Sky Theater.
I'll make a motion that we approve.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that?
Conditions, of course. Beyond this discussion, though. Oh, yeah, that's right.
What is that?
It's a rezone.
It's a
It's a
rezone,
rezone,
so no
this one.
Yeah.
conditions.
So if this would have been a normal CS5 in the rest of the county, they wouldn't have to go through this, correct?
Correct.
Right.
What, anything else? No? All right, all those in
I'm just trying to read my notes here. I guess the biggest issue with this one is
Page,
the fear of what if.
90.
And one gentleman spoke about possible bad uses in that district, and I would suggest, I mean, I'm scanning these, the chart with the permitted uses and conditional uses under countryside. I submit that there are some pretty scary ones there too, so I'm not sure that, especially with as reputable an organization as this, that fear is
Satisfied.
that fear is satisfied.
I don't have a problem with it. If I heard right, there's because I was worried about whether the deals have been struck, but one of the people giving testimony, if I heard it right and remember right, there is a board member who is willing to, as soon as you get this zoning amendment, you have a board member that's ready to write the check and pay for the property.
That's correct.
That's what really allayed my concerns.
Actually, I do have a couple other notes myself. If the church were to build a church there, which is a permitted use underneath the current zoning, they could have clear-cut the entire, basically cut a tremendous amount of trees out of there in order to accomplish putting the building there, correct?
Sure.
Yeah, they could probably clear cut most of it.
And if they would have followed this, if this would have had the same designation, I agree with the concerns about the GC, general commercial designation, and I don't necessarily greatly weigh the potential buyer, because again, it's not a given.
Well-
But it's a very high probability, and if it would have been, if the CS5 would have been zoned like the rest of the county, it wouldn't be an issue. And then all those concerns would have been gone anyways, because CS5 doesn't allow all those other kinds of issues.
What, you have a point too?
I have no points, I'm ready to vote.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. You have your zoning amendment.
Subject to the county board.
Well, the recommendation, yes, that goes to county board for final approval. Okay.
When does that happen?
What was the count?
23rd.
Unanimous.
When is our county board
It will
meeting?
go to county
23rd.
board the fourth Tuesday of June, whatever that is.
23rd.
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 Thank you very much.
Okay, conditional use permit application, Magnetic North, BE LLC.
I'll make that proposal that we approve that.
Second.
Any discussion on that?
Condition.
I don't have any problem with conditions. It's from noon till 6,
Yeah.
no lighting.
Trying to find it.
Or do you want to,
Yep.
even want to?
And the
If I were
parking's
gonna
are
do
clear.
hours, I know they said noon to 6, but I would go outside of that.
would
I
you
think we should
suggest?
just make it a day from 9 to.
8 to 8 or
8 to 8 or 9 to 6
people want
or.
to drink hard cider at 8 in the morning.
All right, all right.
Some do.
Oh, okay, Dave wants.
Is
No,
that
Dave
okay?
doesn't.
Or could you, I think one of the issues was lighting.
Yeah.
So in September,
26.
at 8 o'clock, 8:30, it's dark.
No additional lighting.
So you,
Yeah, we won't allow any additional lighting, so that'll shut it off, but otherwise 8 to 8.
There was no discussion
Is that,
about.
go
I'm sorry.
ahead.
No discussion about music.
They're not gonna have music.
Well, do we want to say that they can't have music?
The conditional use goes with the use on that property, if it's and it changes hands. Well, if there was a change in the condition, they would have to come back for another.
Right, I
If
mean.
they wanted to have music and,
I found that, well,
But we're not out.
now, I think if they wanted to have music, they could have music. If you want to say you can only have music, I don't know.
It is a somewhat confined area, but
Confined, out in the open though, right on the edge of a road. I've seen music in a lot smaller places.
Well, if they had like a function or something and they had like a
Bands, I guess is what I really
quartet
mean
or
to say,
something,
yes.
that's considered
I guess
music too.
You
I
could just
mean-
say, if you wanted to put a condition about music, you could say no outdoor amplified sound. I mean, I can't
Which
imagine
we've used in
a
the
rock
past.
band out
Yeah.
there without,
Yeah, and that would be acceptable. Then an instrument would be fine.
no
So
outdoor
acoustic.
amplified.
You know,
Right.
the area we're approving is almost big enough to put a band on. In other words, they're not gonna have any music there, because what we're approving is less
Exactly.
room than it takes to put a band there,
But
so.
I have a building that does it right now.
Oh,
I finally found the page, it's page 26 of packet number 1, which are the conditions that we had
Good,
recommended.
because my Zoom is yelling at me.
Yes.
It won't do anything anymore.
The 12 months of issuance, that just reiterates the ordinance, they have to do that. I can't imagine that'll be a problem, but that needs to be in there. If you want to talk about outdoor lighting, regular codes, and then again, hours, I didn't catch
Well, we-
hours.
I think,
Well, they said noon to 6, but
Yeah.
I agree with open hours would be fine.
Yeah.
okay,
So what are we
said
saying, 8 to 8?
No,
Ken
8 to
was saying
6?
8 to 8.
8
Yeah.
to 8 and if they don't want to do it, they don't have to, because they
exactly.
only
We don't
ask.
have to be
Exactly.
open 8 to 8.
No, I don't, so,
And we're saying no lighting, what do we, if we said what is here in the report on item 2,
I think you just do that.
probably easier. It says any outdoor lighting erected needs to be in
Yeah.
conjunction, use of size, fixtures without lens, hood, contribution,
Yeah.
Okay.
light thereof.
all right. Is that fine with
Yep.
everybody? Okay. That being said, all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Robert J. Geithner, conditional use permit.
Make a motion to approve?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on that?
I'd like to have a clarification how this is a home business on a commercial property.
Because there is a.
Just once.
I just would
I-
love to know.
I would like to have a motion and, yeah, okay, let's vote.
You can ask, but you may not receive.
Um,
I just don't understand that. It's a commercial business, it's entire, I mean, I don't get it.
There's
Well,
a
yes,
residence that's
resident.
accessory
I understand that,
apartment, Mr.
but he's using the commercial business as property.
Well, he's using a
Room
part of
and
a garage in
space.
the back and then part of a room in the building. It is unusual, we've never had anybody apply to do a home business based out of a residence that's within a commercial building, but there, we went through the ordinance and there's nothing that
Nothing
says that
against
you
it.
can't. So, and that's the only way to process the type of business.
And why
that he
couldn't he
wants
just
to
do it underneath the commercial business?
Because it's
different
zoned
business.
general agriculture there. Mr.
Why is
Keith-
it zoned ag if it came before ag?
Well, I don't know.
Before
We
zoning.
wondered that also. But that property, the entire property, including the restaurant, is zoned general agriculture. So,
It seems
I
inappropriate.
call for the motion.
We already have the motion. Why don't you
We
call
need a
for the
condition.
question?
Yeah, call for the question.
Well, we need a
Yeah, doing the-
condition for time, for hours.
So page 46 and 47.
He specified.
Not my fault, you
8 a.m.
scheduled a meeting at the time.
It was
you said
7?
I think he said
Seven to
7 to
sunset.
sunset.
It's okay.
Is that fine? 7 to sunset.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. Jason Brower, conditional use permit to establish a 5-acre non-metallic mine.
Mr. Chairman, I just remind you that I will not be participating in this vote.
Okay. Looking for a motion one way or another.
I'll make a motion that we disapprove.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it. I have a problem with this one, but because it seems, it's just, I guess, it's too close to all those homes, and it's in that core. And I keep rereading, there's a small paragraph, and then God knows I'll not find it on my Zoom right now, but it basically, I just think it changes the character of that core area.
Any other comments? No, I'm gonna rebut that.
Go ahead.
I would not want to vote against the town. I just don't like to do that. And I do understand everybody's concern about it disrupting the area. It will, for a few years.
The town's against it.
the town is against it.
The town's against it?
That's why I say, I hate to vote
Oh,
against
I
it,
thought you said-
against the town.
Oh, I see
You
what
know,
you're saying.
so, but I see the inconvenience as short-term, the concerns. You can breathe dust from one of our quarries all day, every day. It's not gonna hurt you. It turns to a powder, doesn't hurt your lungs. It doesn't,
Sure.
it's
That's
not.
what they said about asbestos too.
No, asbestos is different. But there's more pollution comes up from Chicago that we get than what's
Worse.
gonna come out of one of those crushing operations, especially a small one like that. There really is. And the blasting they do now, you don't even feel the ground shake unless you're right on top of it. And I mean right on top of it. So I understand the concerns that everybody brought up, but I understand they're not really there, is what I'm saying. And I hate to turn this down, so I'm in a quandary too. I want to go along with the town and keep the boss happy, but I also understand that this is a minor inconvenience in an area that, you know, in a few years, once he cleans it up, and they have to, it's going to be beautiful. There's going to be a nice pond right there. It won't be a problem. But all that said, I'm ready to vote. All those in favor of denial, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Yeah, I hate to turn you down. I understand what you're trying to do. I understand it really isn't a problem, but you've got all the neighbors, you've got the town, and it just, I'm sorry. All right.
How much more time, Mr. Chairman, do we have here?
There you go. State of the meeting
let's see,
ends.
Mike.
It's good.
Go fast.
Yeah, discussion and possible action regarding Joint Finance Committee, May 27 to 29, 2015 approval of a motion to insert into Wisconsin State Budget Bill, item number 23 regarding county shoreland zoning. Now, without reading the whole thing.
Yeah, give us a good synopsis.
I'll give
because
you, okay, and I think I can just briefly go over the memo. Well, as you know, the Joint Finance Committee at the state level is in the midst of putting together the state budget and approving or disapproving pieces of the governor's budget, and there seem to be a large variety of policy items that are getting stuck in there that don't necessarily have anything to do with the budget, and this is one of them. Motion 520, and then the item 23 is what relates to shoreline zoning, was passed last week by the Joint Finance Committee, which I've been told, as far as how the process works, means it's probably pretty much in there, and it's going to be in the budget, and then when the budget goes to the legislature, all you can do is say yes or no. You can't pull pieces
Correct.
out of it. The concerns with this are, one, that it's a major policy change, and it's being put into the budget rather than going through a regular legislative process where you've got public input and hearings and everything else. And then again, when it reaches the legislature, all they can do is say yes or no on the whole budget bill, not on these pieces. The policy change is that shoreline zoning since 1968 in Wisconsin, the state has set the minimum standards, and then counties were free to do what they wanted above that if they wanted to. And that's been true since 1968, except for Act 170, which we recently just had to revise our ordinance to bring the Act 170 pieces in. What this does, as far as the substance of the motion, it's now going to say that counties have to do exactly what the state regulations are for shoreline zoning. If you were a county that wanted to do more, like a higher setback or whatever it was, you're not going to be allowed to anymore. It significantly changes policy regarding non-conforming structures. Non-conforming structures are structures that don't meet current setbacks. So since 1968, we've allowed people to maintain and repair their non-conforming structures. This would allow you to knock it down completely and build a brand new non-conforming structure in that same footprint, but you could go up 35 feet. So I could take a tiny dumpy little cottage that I have down by the water, knock it down, and then put a 3-story tall skinny house on that same spot. So that seems to be a major difference.
Wait, don't we have a height limit?
35 feet's our height limit. So they're saying that you can only regulate things that are taller than 35 feet, but we already have that limit anyway.
Okay, and it would be undoing all the stuff we just got done doing here.
Well, right, that too. And not only am I allowed now, if this goes through, to knock down my building and build a brand new one, possibly up to 35 feet, even if my old one was only 1 story. The one piece of the motion says that no permits, fees, or mitigation measures may be required by the county to use those options. So we still have to track that you're following the same footprint that you had before, but we don't get to charge you any fees, and it's going to take probably a minimum of 2 site visits to see what was there before and what's there after, and maybe to go during to see.
Implements husbandry things.
So I just think that
no fee permits.
Yeah, the other thing, they offer a definition of structure in here to be used with shoreline zoning, which includes things like patios and decks. And then when you read the motion, it talks about, like I just said, you can take a non-conforming structure, rip it out and replace it with a new one. You know, does that mean that I get to take my patio that's down by the water and rip that out and put a building there? It's not really clear. I don't know if that's what they intend, but it's not clear. And then the last thing that was in the memo that I talked about was, it said, you know, we've got impervious surface ratio limits, and there's reasons for that: water quality protection, habitat protection, runoff to neighbors, you know, open space, that kind of thing. It says that a county shoreline zoning ordinance can no longer regulate impervious surfaces, period. So we wouldn't be able to pick a percentage for each district or the shoreline areas, unless you say that, how do they word this? It's really odd wording. Unless impervious surfaces are redefined such that they are considered pervious if runoff from the surface is treated by a runoff device or system. So what that would mean is, if Door County wanted to regulate within the shoreline area impervious surface ratios anymore, anybody that wanted to add an impervious surface to their property would have to get a stormwater runoff control plan, because there'd be no way otherwise for us to regulate it. And that seems like a ridiculous, I'm assuming we're gonna still wanna continue to regulate impervious surfaces, and that seems like a crazy expense to add.
Which
to
we
property
have
owners.
been regulating since '95 for sure.
Oh, we've been,
Impervious surface.
no, since the sixties.
Before that, okay.
Yeah.
We're one
Yeah.
county that has been doing it
Yeah.
for a long time.
But anyway, so those are just kind of the major things that really hit us when we looked at this. There's obviously all sorts of environmental reasons why shoreline zoning has been developed and why it's in place. And soon I would probably be the first to tell you that we don't love everything in that law either. But the state spent 7 years, up to 2000, trying to revise what had been adopted in 1968. And then now all of a sudden they're gonna stick something in the budget that completely guts everything. So I think I'm almost more mad about the process part of it than about.
Could I
So-
speak to this?
process part.
Yeah, I was gonna ask where we go from here, but why don't you,
Well,
go ahead.
first of all, she's right about the joint finance, except, I mean, our Joel Kitchens, for example, we talked with him about a number of issues, and he wrote at least 3 motions for joint finance, which they used to fix some of the concerns we had. Maybe it's too late. Maybe he could still talk to his budget buddy, as they call him, or whatever, and do another one. That's possible. Once it gets to the floor, yes, they vote up or down, but they do have the opportunity to send up an amendment. Almost never happens. It's kind of almost a done deal, but it's possible. If there was enough hue and cry around the state, maybe. The thing that makes me the maddest about this is 2 things. One, it's taking away more local control. Mr. Tiffany, who is doing this, is the same gentleman who had the proposal last time about taking away local control with the mining. That's the sponsor of this. And the second thing is the fact that it's stuck in that budget, so this isn't debated on its merit. There are no hearings. I absolutely go nuts with this kind of thing. I would love to see us send a resolution to county board, but in the meantime, somebody contact Joel and ask if there's any influence he could have to get this talked about again at joint finance. I don't know whether he can.
When does this
It may
come
be too late. Soon.
Well, I
pass?
had heard that the Joint Finance
Pretty
Committee
close.
was gonna actually vote tomorrow, but then I just read something yesterday that said they may not meet again until next week, so.
Well, they're fighting
I
over
don't-
the transportation bill.
Yeah, I know that.
Once that's done, it's done.
I think I put a sample in your packet.
Well, I was just gonna say,
With
just-
Sharon County, and since then
Yeah.
I've gotten Vilas and Douglas and probably more emails sitting upstairs with other counties that are doing it. I don't know what kind of a timetable.
You mean that
they're on.
our
In
They're
opposition to
passing
it.
resolutions that
Yes.
basically say a lot of what we just said, which is we really object to the process by which this is being done.
but if
You know,
even if we put one together
It's gonna be
quickly,
late in
it
the
would be
process.
too late
Yeah.
to get it by the 23rd.
I mean, if you
Well,
tell me
it'd be
that
too
you want
late
me
for the
to,
county board resolution to get there. Can we send a letter?
yeah, I mean, if you tell me you want me to write a letter or you want me to call Joel Kitchens,
'Cause
I'd
we
be
can certainly do
happy to
that,
those.
which does not require county board action on it.
Sure.
Well, there's nothing wrong with having county board on the record.
Well, yeah, I would
But we
agree.
can't only do that. We gotta do something else sooner if we're gonna do something.
But what I'm getting at is that the budget will be dealt with by the time we meet the next time. So we.
Probably.
Well, joint finance will be done.
Joint finance will be
Yeah,
done for sure.
well, that will be done, yeah. So my point would be, one of the steps we should do immediately is send a letter that the Door County RPC is in opposition to it. That would work. That doesn't need county board approval, correct?
Right.
But then
We
still,
Try and contact Mr. Kitchens and see if there's.
that's the
anything he can
contact
do.
point, yeah. But this, we could also do a resolution for county board, but it still would be minimal value.
I mean, ideally, joint
Timing
finance
wise.
pulls it out of the budget. And if they want to then propose it, then we'd be on record, you know, and they could introduce it as a bill, and then it could, you know, go where it goes. But for heaven's sakes, take it out.
And to put it this late into it, it's been sitting there for a while, and it just came up at the tail end of their budget process.
Are we all in agreement with
I
the
am.
letter? Why don't you draft one and,
Okay, I'm basically gonna work off the memo that I wrote that was in the packets. And, I mean, I can email it to everybody. I think I'll probably call Joel tomorrow. And I'll draft the letter, email it to everybody tomorrow, and then on Monday, I'll just go ahead and mail it unless I've heard back from people that you've got objections.
that sounds fine.
Okay. Do you want us to write a resolution then also?
I would like you to.
I can do
I
the
don't
same
know
thing,
about
I
the
can work
rest.
off of the memo and,
For the 23rd, even though it's too late.
Well,
Just to
it
show
isn't
that we are.
necessarily too late. It's not too late. I don't think the budget will be passed by then.
Right.
But joint
Right.
finance
Finance
may be
might
done
be
with their
done.
work
Yes.
by then.
Yeah.
So
But
I,
at least we're on the record.
Okay, that's fine. Do
All right.
that then.
I can email the resolution to you guys also, just so you see what it looks like.
Well, yeah, and we've got a meeting on the 18th, so we could okay the
Oh, that's true.
resolution and pass on the county board.
Okay,
On the
the
18th.
packets will probably be, the packets will be done by then, but I can, yeah.
Oh,
Well,
true, because
oh,
it's
no.
a Thursday.
County board packets are usually done by that Thursday.
Well, that's all right, they can insert it as long as it's
I
24
can
hours.
give, yeah, I'll figure it out.
Besides, the packet can be done and out.
still 24
And if
hours.
we add that resolution on Thursday, they can just make up an amended,
Agenda.
well, amended.
Well, okay, so you put it on, have it put on the agenda.
Yeah.
And when it's done, you just send it out as an amended packet,
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Okay,
or in addition to the packet.
yeah, yeah.
all right, so I'll talk to Lori.
Well, I was gonna say an amended agenda, and only one page would change, just that cover page would change, the agenda page.
But you'd have to
Yeah,
have the
I don't-
resolution
I'm-
then too
I
for
don't
them.
know.
Well, but we'll have the resolution on the 18th.
Right, but it'd have to be in the packet.
To be able to be
To be able to
read.
be-
by
So
us
if you put it on the agenda, get it on the agenda.
Yeah.
So it goes out on the 18th or whenever she sends it out. But then we approve the resolution at our next meeting on the 18th, then she just sends an
Okay.
amended packet
That will
with the
work,
resolution in it.
that'll work,
Because actual notice is 24 hours anyway, so.
yeah,
Correct.
okay, all right. Anything else on that?
No,
At least that gets us on the,
It gets it out there.
it gets it out there,
That's-
yeah, yeah.
Well, the other law about local control was basically defeated because everybody
Right,
around the
we got
state
together.
screamed.
Right.
So,
So the letter's gonna go to Joel, it's gonna go to joint finance,
I'm-
each member.
sure.
sure.
Why not?
And an example
And
of
I'm
local
gonna call.
control, had that other one passed, we wouldn't have had this hearing today.
Correct.
It's true.
Okay, so
Maybe we should wish it should pass.
I will call Joel, but I'll also draft a letter, we'll have another joint finance and Joel.
And
What's
it wouldn't
next?
be in litigation.
What's on there now?
Okay.
All right, okay. Let's go to future meeting schedule. Are we on for June 8? Oh, yes, definitely June 18th.
Don't have any
That's the meeting I'm
Zoning
not gonna
hearings,
be at.
planning meeting.
Um,
Are there hearings?
There are no hearings, but we'll have a bunch of wetland maps for you to review for the next towns, and
Okay,
I forgot what else we've got.
all right. And no meeting on the 2nd? And we'll just hold July 16th?
I think you'll probably
We'll
have.
have
we've
at
had-
least 3 cases.
Yeah, we've had applications.
Okay, so tentatively keep July 16th open. With that, Mr. City, if you're in a rush, I
Motion to
would entertain a
adjourn.
motion to
Second.
adjourn. Motion made and seconded to adjourn.
Get
If
out
there's
of
no-
here.
Oh, that's not even discussable. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right, we're adjourned.
16 after. for
Thank you.